Hey, YouTube, what's happening?
What's up, guys?
Welcome to Gas Masks and Hand Grenades. I'm your host, Metal Man. It's Jeff, and today I have my BFF here, Serge, and I always point the wrong way, so whichever way he is, he's next to me there. He's riding shotgun as we welcome dear old friend onto the show. He is the current bassist in several multinational and UK-based bands such as O.R.k, Fractal Sextet, Metallic Taste of Blood, Random Noise Generator, and collaborative projects such as those with John Durant on several albums. Robert Jurgendal, did I get that right? Yeah. Astarte Edwin Durant Kovtun, Twin Skates with Lorenzo Feliciati, Infinite Regress with Robert Peck, Endless Tapes with Alessandro Pedretti. Yeah, and that's it. I'm not going any deeper than that. We're gonna bring him on to talk about all those things. Welcome, Colin Edwin. How you doing, man?
Oh, good. Yeah, how you doing? All right.
How'd I do on all those names? It's like an international.
Yeah. I know the Italian pronunciation's a little bit tricky sometimes, but yeah, I think I'd give you a 7 or 8, maybe.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that. So just as a real quick aside, I was thinking about this when I had 2 streams interviews I did last night. One with an old high school buddy who became a huge mega melodic hard rock star over in Europe. He sings for Axel Rudi Pell. He's a singer. I don't know if you ever heard of that German guitar player.
Yeah.
Johnny Joelli. Have you ever heard that name?
Oh, I don't know that one.
He's a very much like a Dio. Sounds a lot like Ronnie James Dio.
Okay.
But he's huge over there. But he could walk around here in the States and nobody know who he was. And we were on for like almost 2 hours, and then I did another one with the guitar player from Gorguts after that for 2.5 hours. And I'm like, I went to sleep at like 8:30 last night, which I never do that, right, Serge? Serge will get text from me at like 4 a.m. He's like, dude, what are you still doing awake? You know, that kind of shit. So, but I was thinking to myself, the first time we all met we met at the same time. Like, I didn't know Serge before I met you the same day, and that was the Wheaton, Maryland show at the Phantasmagoria on May 26, 1999, down outside D.C. Do you remember that weird shit? You were opening for Gong, and It was that weird sort of quasi CD record store, fry bar, and area that you could jam and have a show. Do you remember that place?
Yeah, I remember the name. I was wondering if it was the place that had a medieval galleon in the middle of the venue. It's like a place.
This place was it was really no joke. It was a record store with a fry cook bar. Like, you could get fries and a hamburger in the corner. I've never seen that in my life. And then out in the center area was where you guys played, and you guys were doing you had the Jesus bus. You remember that? The Jesus bus?
Yeah, very much remember the Jesus.
I bet that was a lot of fun, right? So yeah, we met that same day because I walked in, didn't have a ticket. I found out about that show literally like 2 days before that. I'd only discovered Porcupine Tree maybe 6 weeks before that show. And this was all pre-internet. That was I guess, was it pre-internet or not then in 99?
No, I mean, it was around. That's how I heard of PT in the first place. No.
Maybe I did have the internet at that point in time, but there wasn't any the band didn't have websites. Serge had a website. You didn't have a website for the
Probably
band.
No. I mean, I wouldn't have had one.
Well, no, right.
Email or anything at that point.
Right. Steve had kind of a rudimentary website back then, very rudimentary. But I found out about the show. I come in, I walk in to get a ticket because I didn't even have a ticket, and you guys are all sitting around like munching on fries, or I don't know what you were doing, but you were like hanging out like, okay, now what do we do? And I just walked over and said hello to all you guys. I was like, what are these? I'm thinking to myself, these guys are international rock stars. What are they doing sitting there? Little did I know, right? But, and then I walk out and I'm going to get in line, and this guy's standing there with his friend Winston. And the reason, Serge, you never would have said a word to me if I wasn't wearing one specific shirt. I was wearing a Frontline Assembly Fatalist shirt, and he goes, dude, that's a killer band, killer shirt. You know how that goes. The mating call guys. We're like, hey, you're wearing a Carcass shirt. And that's how we met. And so all three of us met the very same day and lived happily ever after.
So did you stay for Gong? Were they on after us?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty cool, weird band. Very weird band.
Yeah, I was a huge Gong fan, and
I like the Pierre Morland version though much better.
Okay, the instrumental stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was a big fan, and they sort of, when I first knew them, they didn't exist. They were in a David Allen had disbanded the whole thing.
Yeah.
Everything else seemed to have fizzled out. And then I went to a gig that was David Allen and a bunch of women and Didier Malherbe. And
Didier Merlin, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was like the rebirth. So a few years later, well, quite a few years later, maybe even 10 years later, he'd gone through all these different lineups. And I think for that tour, it was some of the original members.
Jilly was there. Is her name Jilly? Was that her name?
Jilly Smythe was there, yeah.
She was there. David Allen was wearing a purple wizard suit, man. He looks so fucking cool. It's like, this guy's a trip and a half. Now, I guess he passed a couple years ago, but
yeah.
But I don't know. I couldn't tell you who else was in that band. Hillage was not there. I know that.
No, I know because I became friends with him later on. It was Mark Hewins, a guitar player.
Oh yeah, I know that name.
Yeah, so the Canterbury. He's played with a lot of Canterbury people, and in fact, he's done a lot of stuff with Jeff Lee, who I do XY's Heads with.
Right.
So.
Okay, did he play with Peter Murphy too?
No, I don't think so. No,
okay.
He played with Hugh Hopper quite a lot, and he played
Matching
with
Mole and those guys. That whole
he played with he had a band called the Polite Force. Like police force,
Polite Force. Okay, right.
A few other things that I can't recall at the moment, but yeah, that was Mark on guitar. I'm pretty sure they didn't have a keyboard player, which was unusual for them.
Yeah, I don't remember that's going. I did hang out for it all, and it was rather interesting. I'm not as into that phase of God. I definitely like the jazzy Pierre Morland version of it much better. Didier, what's his name? Didier Malhabra or whatever it is.
Malherbe, I think. Malherbe.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Malherbe. Yeah.
My French isn't good.
Malherbe, fantastic multi-instrumentalist. Saxophone, flute, and I've got a few records where he plays like ethnic instruments like Turkish ney and stuff like that. And I've even got an album where he played some modified plastic pipe, and he did the whole album with this. I think it's called a Zeph, which I don't know. It was like a weird horn. Yeah, I think so. I believe so. It wasn't wooden or something, but I've got that somewhere. I used to love his solo stuff as well.
Well, that was our introduction. Well, no. Serge, tell. I don't know if Colin knows the story. He probably does, but
so the first time I technically saw you was the first show on that tour, if you could call it that, at Don Hills in New York. That was that little kind of dive bar. That was, I think,
wasn't that a complete disaster?
It was. Yeah, that was the one where Steve's amp caught on fire, and it was very weird. Like I remember coming in, there was some guy passed out at the front entrance.
Yeah, that was. I believe that was our manager.
Wait, was it Cosmic? Was it Cosmic Ken?
No, Cosmic Ken wasn't a manager. There was a phase when Cosmic Ken was the tour manager. But no, I believe the guy passed out was actually Richard Allen.
Oh wow,
Richard Allen.
Yeah, was the first manager of the band. So
was he drunk or was he just tired?
Tired. I think there was some American grass involved.
It might have been grass.
Potentially.
Well, so I read off a lot of names there, and I probably didn't hit every single one because there's a lot to get through. And we're not going to be able to hit on every one, and we'll be here till 3 p.m. But that's not really. It's not hyperbole to say that. As I said, we're going to get through as many of these bands and projects, but we're just super stoked that we got you here, and we're glad that you're here. And it's been so long. It's just so cool to see you again after all these years. Because you did see us out there on the road a lot when you came to the States. I'm
pretty sure every American tour we did, you guys definitely, and there's a few other faces and names I can probably dig up if I think about it.
We traveled too a lot. We went out to the West Coast with you guys, and about the only place I didn't really go, like I even went to the Midwest. I was even at the Chicago, the Arriving Somewhere video, for that live show. Yeah. But I was a little bit crazy at that point in time. I was going through a divorce, and I had a lot of time on my hands, and I had some money as severance package. And so it was cool. And I I was very grateful for those times. Those were really fun times to look back on and relive and go, wow, man, remember when you did all those crazy things that now you never would have half the energy to do anymore, you know?
Or the time if you have a toddler.
Or the time, yeah. So tell me, Colin, I want to start off with kind of going back into your formative years, and I kind of do this with everybody. Tell me about your first memories of music as a kid. And I don't think I realized this, but you're actually Aussie. You were born in Australia.
Yeah, I was born in Australia, and I lived there. I only spent, the first maybe 4 or 5 years of my life there. I was very young. My parents were actually English immigrants to Australia.
Okay.
And they kind of did it in reverse. So I've got older sisters and brother, and they emigrated with their family, and I think I was a bit of an afterthought that appeared.
Gotcha.
I mean, they were there for a long time. They were there for about 12 years. And I think they both came from very big extended families. And after a long time, I think both my parents started to miss their roots.
Yeah.
And also Australia now, of course, it's difficult to put it into context now, but it felt probably more isolated in those days than it would do now, because there was no Skype, and communication was a phone call once a month, or it was really expensive, Right. So I think after a while they decided to come back to Europe, to come back to England, So I was born while they were living there, so I'm a dual national actually, which is great.
Oh, are you? Okay. So what do you remember as a kid? What are your first? Because you're a little younger than me. What are you, 52?
52, yeah.
52. I'm 57 almost. I'll be 57 in March, and Serge is the baby amongst us here at 45, right, bud?
45, yeah.
Yeah, he's a young whippersnapper. What do you remember of that time as a young kid? Because I always tell this. I very much remember Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water, James Taylor, Sweet Baby James, Carole King, Tapestry. That's what my mom was listening to. And Beethoven's Fifth. I always remember that. Dun, 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 dun. That's will stick with me forever. What memories do you have of that period of your life that stuck with you to this day?
Yeah. Well, my father played jazz guitar, and he was a huge fan of Oscar Peterson. And he was actually of the age group that was sort of pre-rock and roll. So he didn't like rock music generally. I mean, there were a few things he would, I think I can remember years later listening to Santana, and he came in, and that's really great. That's better than the stuff you usually listen to, But I remember very clearly a lot of Oscar Peterson records, him playing a lot of Oscar Peterson with Joe Pass mainly.
Joe Pass, yeah. How about Wes Montgomery?
Yeah, he loved Wes Montgomery, loved Joe Pass, Jim Hall, of course. And then he had a phase of Indian classical music. So
wow.
I remember listening to like Ravi Shankar. And I think because of his interest in jazz, he got drawn to that kind of stuff,
So now it makes sense. Everything about you makes complete sense. You had that jazz background at a very young age.
Yeah, although I have to admit, I wasn't a fan. I associated it with my dad. And of course, I didn't really get into it in a big way until, sadly, he died when I was quite young. And I inherited most of his records.
Oh, okay.
So I went through and used to listen to, and sometimes it's a nice association because there's a memory involved with listening to the music, to the time when he was around having it on in the house. So I'll always associate that music with him. And I think someone of that era, his age group, pre-rock and roll, they liked big band music and they liked jazz and stuff.
Duke Ellington, Benny Goodman, stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, a lot of stuff like that. So I've still got a lot of his records, and there's some fantastic stuff in there. Dizzy Gillespie and stuff like that.
Charlie Parker.
Not so much the bebop stuff.
No Miles or no.
Yeah, a little bit of Miles Davis. I think the quartet. The sort of he kind of lost Miles. He didn't go into the electric era.
Wow. Yeah.
Or any of that. But yeah, certainly some of those records I definitely heard a lot when I was really young, so it's in there somewhere.
Do you have any kind of like specific memory that stands out? Like I don't know, you were going on a family trip and there's that particular record was playing, or well, I guess you weren't playing records in the car, but I mean, you know, I guess you weren't even playing tapes either. Now that
Cassettes, yeah, cassettes.
yeah, well, we are really old. But I mean, was there any kind of like, I don't know, maybe you went somewhere and you stayed at a summer someplace, a summer cottage, and they brought the records in, the families got together. Nothing
I can remember very clearly. There's an album that one of my favorite Oscar Peterson albums is one called We Get Requests, which is a trio record. And I remember very clearly being in the car with my dad having that on, you know, driving somewhere, I don't know where, but I can just remember that moment. And that's, I really love that record. There's some great Ray Brown double bass. And it's interesting how, I guess it took me a while to appreciate how amazing those records actually are, you know.
Well, you know, especially because being a recording artist yourself now, you know what it was like pre-Pro Tools, pre-digital, to actually, you had to know what the hell you were doing, because otherwise.
Yeah, but I also think probably when I was younger, which is less so with my kids, it's something from the previous era,
right,
was automatically less interesting. You know, you didn't really give it time. I mean, things now, everything exists at this point, doesn't it? You know, you can go on YouTube and just see whatever you want to see anytime from any era. This morning I was looking up a silent movie from 1917 because I read about a character called Pimple. And I found a load of Pimple. I can't remember the name of the movie, but if you Google, if you look Pimple silent movie, this silent movie comes up, you know. Something I've never heard of. And that's from, you know, my grandparents, not even my grandparents, and my grandparents era.
I love that stuff. I love silent movies like the Strange Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and of course,
fantastic. Yeah.
You know, you got Faust and stuff like that. Just crazy, you know, Fritz Lang stuff from back there
really creative as well.
Amazing. Yeah. The sets, you're just like, what were these, like, how? And then you got the George Millet stuff where he did the, you know, the original Man, what's it called, The Man in the Moon or whatever, where
this
is like late 1800s stuff, and you're like, how are they coming up with these sets?
I mean, they were so limited.
Yeah.
With what they had available, but they really made some fantastic art, you know.
Let me ask you,
for me, I suppose, you know.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the things that were from the past were just automatically kind of rejected because it was always, you know, it wasn't available in the same way. You couldn't go and see things. So I would just initially have maybe thought jazz was something for my dad, you know, and his friends and his age group. I didn't, you know, at that when I was sort of 14, 15, and then later on, I kind of appreciated it more, you know.
Well, clearly, I mean, clearly the way, okay, so that leads into the question of what led, was the bass your first instrument, or did you do the piano lesson thing, or what was your first entry into? Did you do the high school viola thing, or what, you know, how was?
No, I didn't do any of that. I did. I was just spending so much time listening to music, really, that I wanted to get involved in doing it, you know.
Right.
And there were some people at my school who were playing in bands and stuff, and I just sort of thought it'd be great to do something, you know, like I'm spending hours and hours listening to cassettes, you know, and I just sort of wanted to do it. It's like a passion that you discover that's within you. And I hadn't had any interest in it when I was younger. My older siblings were all encouraged to play instruments.
Okay.
And I didn't do it. I don't know why. I just resisted it. I mean, at one point my mum said, "Oh, you can learn the trumpet at school," but I think I just I didn't get as far as getting a trumpet or getting any lessons or anything. I just kind of avoided the whole situation, and I didn't want to do it. But, you know, fast forward a few years, and I said to my father, you know, I'd really like to get a guitar because there were guitars in the house, and my older brother played classical guitar. And I think he probably thought, well, he either thought that there would be some rivalry between me and my brother,
right,
or he thought that maybe it'd be nice secretly to have a bass player in the house so he could jam with me.
Okay.
So he got me quite reluctantly a very cheap bass out of the local paper that some guy was selling. And I can remember going around to get it. And this guy, you know, whipped it out and played a load of stuff on it and then just sort of gave it to me. And I didn't have a clue. I just, you know, but I just thought this is my start, you know. But the really magic part of the whole story is that within about 2 weeks, there's a chap I met who's a friend of mine. He was associated with my older sister's group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a session musician at the time. He still is. Martin Elliott he's called. He lives. I'm still in touch with him. And he was around the house one day visiting my sister with his girlfriend. And he said, "Oh, you've got a bass. Can I have a look?" You know. And I picked it up and showed it to him. And he said, "Oh, have you tried this, that, and the other?" Of course, I didn't know a bloody thing.
Okay.
So he said, "Oh, well, I can show you a couple of things, you know." And he sort of showed me how to hold it, and then he said, "Oh, look, come around my house next week. He only lived down the road, and I'll show you a couple of things." You know, it was really generous of him. He wasn't trying to tout for lessons or
right.
It was just that he had an interest. And then I went around his house, and he showed me sort of how to hold it and how to pluck the string. You know, his kind of method, which was he's very much a sort of I guess Martin came from the Jaco Pastorius school.
Okay.
He knew that he had a great technique, that kind of finger style thing. He had all that going on, you know. And I was really impressed because he could slap and do all kinds of things that I just, you know, they always look impressive when you see people do that.
Sure.
So I went from having an instrument that, I mean, my father had tried showing me a few things, but I just wasn't responsive to it because he was coming up with all these jazz tunes that I just didn't know.
Right.
And I didn't relate to. So Martin gave me in the end, he gave me sort of lessons, but in a really informal way. For kind of a couple of years, I used to go around his house fairly regularly, and he'd show me stuff. And he taught me how to read music, which I never would have bothered with otherwise. You know, my ambition at the time didn't extend beyond just playing with my mates at school.
Yeah.
And I didn't really think I had any kind of future with music. It was just something I didn't understand. I couldn't articulate what I wanted to do with it, but I just had this passion that I wanted to do it. You know, And I can remember a friend of mine, as we're walking home from school, and my friend played the guitar, and we kind of got together, you know, attempted to make some sounds together. And he said to me, "Oh, you know, Colin, it'd be great if we could like do some stuff together, and you and me, and we could go and play in a pub or something. That'd be great, wouldn't it?" And I remember thinking, I said, yeah, sure, John, you know. And I was thinking in my head, and I can still remember this thought, thinking that'll never happen. There's no way I'm going to do that.
Right,
you know?
right.
And I even remember going to some music shop to buy some strings, and I met this girl from my class, you know, and she's, "Oh, Colin, what are you doing here?" You know, because she was like one of the musical kids that played the flute or something, and worked in the music shop part time. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm getting some strings for my bass." And she says to me, "Well, when can I come and see you play?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm never going to do that."
Never, no way.
I had no idea, really.
So wait a minute, Colin. Apparently, you missed the part about rock stars getting chicks from playing gigs. You missed that part, didn't you?
Yeah.
Especially bass players.
Especially the bass players, exactly.
Well, you're on the fringe, you see, with the bass, you know.
Right. So now, how old are you at this stage? You're 14?
Well, I was quite late to music. I was maybe 15.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah, that is.
So, yeah, I didn't play any instrument at all.
So did you pick up Dad's? I mean, okay, I'm assuming Dad had a nice guitar and he didn't want you messing with it. But did you pick up any of the guitars around the house and try and plunk around?
Yeah, without his knowledge, definitely. I went into his. He had like a study office, and I remember going in there and pulling out one of his really nice semi-acoustic guitars and taking it upstairs and, I don't know, just sitting with it and trying to do something.
Try not to bang into anything, so if there's a new ding on it, that it's like, where'd this come from?
Yeah.
So do you? I assume, you know, as a guitarist myself, and Serge is a bassist, I can play a bass fairly well. I can do the pick thing and I can do the finger thing because I do a lot of finger style on the guitar. Do you do much actual guitar playing at all? Have you throughout your career done much guitar?
No, not really. No. I mean, I've got a guitar, a couple of nice guitars that I like to pick up occasionally. My middle son plays the guitar really well. He plays classical stuff. And he reads, unusually for a guitar player, he reads music really well.
I was going to say, that's a rarity, yeah.
Yeah, so I occasionally pick up a guitar, and I like with an electric guitar just because it's a great way of making sounds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can treat it without really being able to play it particularly well.
Right.
Which you can't. you can make some really interesting sounds with the guitar. So I do occasionally do the bow and some effects and just some simple chords and things. And initially I did try learning the guitar because playing the bass, you can't hear chords in the same way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I wanted to learn some chord voicings, and I got a book of chord voicings, and I'd sit and just play. You can hear what E-7 sounds like, which is difficult on the bass,
Serge, do you have something you want to jump in with?
Sorry,
Serge.
I'm good. I was gonna, I guess, continue as we get a little further.
Yeah, you'll jump in when we get to the band stuff. Okay. Last two quick ones here, Colin. Did you have? It sounds to me very distinctly like you've answered my question without me asking, and that is, did you have this great design on being a professional musician? It sounds like no.
Well, I think that came later.
Okay.
Because I started to see it as a possibility, and I think that's always a good thing. When you get in a situation where you can see it as a possibility, then it can become a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember the first thing I ever did, the first situation I got into where I had to learn a load of songs and play them in front of an audience was a school play. And a friend of mine talked me into being in the band for the school play, and I really didn't want to do it because I thought it was really naff initially. But anyway, I ended up being the only one that went to all the rehearsals and learnt the songs. And I was the only one that knew all the tempos and could count them in. So I became like sort of default person that knew what was going on. Because, kids are unreliable, aren't they? And
Right. You were the band. You were essentially the band.
Well, I kind of took it a bit more seriously. But
yeah,
the interesting thing about that experience, and I reflected on this quite recently because I bumped into a really old friend who remembered the whole situation, is that the drama teacher was really good. And he brought in a load of people that were like professional lighting people. And he had a sound engineer, and he had one of the guys who'd been involved in this. It was a musical. So someone who'd been involved in a performance in the past came and sort of coached the band a little bit. We're all sort of 16, 17. He's showing us, why don't you do it like this? And so we had, I think we ended up with actually quite a good looking show. And
this is what, like mid-80s?
Well, I mean, I met
mid-80s
people that I didn't. Yeah, late 80s, yeah.
Late 80s, okay.
So I can remember distinctly meeting the lighting guy, and I didn't even know that there was a job that involved doing lights in a theatre, and it was fascinating to me. So you're meeting people that are doing things that are a little bit outside of the norm,
right?
But they're doing it for a job and they're enjoying it, and it's this sort of creative environment, and that was a bit of a catalyst for me because I started to think, well, maybe I could do it, and then I'd had a lot of fun playing. And I sort of thought, well, why don't I try? My parents were really supportive about it.
I was going to ask that. Okay.
Yeah, well, I think although my father didn't understand rock music, he appreciated that I was applying myself, to doing it. And he could sort of see the result. I was actually getting somewhere. And I think, that counted for a lot. So they didn't poo-poo they didn't poo-poo my ideas or my ambition when I finally had it. I mean, I can remember a really good guitar playing friend of mine from years ago said to his parents, I want to play the guitar for a living. And he said his father, first of all, laughed, fell off the chair, and then stood up and said, if you do anything like that, I'm kicking you out of the house now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I didn't have that at all. My parents
were
just like, oh, yeah, give it a go. Give it a go. Why not?
You said your father passed young. Did he get to see your success at all, or?
No, not at all. No.
Man.
I think I just did. I just started to get gigs and stuff, really, and then he got really ill, and then he was. That was it, really. So I didn't get any sort of parental. You're not from him. Luckily, my mother was quite supportive. My mother was very, very good. She was my biggest critic.
Oh yeah.
As well, yeah. She was. I'd always give her stuff, even if I thought she'd hate it. I'd always give her the CDs and things, and she was very open-minded. Actually,
she's still alive, or
no, not anymore. No,
but she got to see some of the success with PT, and
yeah, I remember my mother coming to the Royal Albert Hall, which was great, of course.
Oh man!
And finally, she thought that was, there's my son.
You made it.
So yeah, that was good. That was nice.
That's awesome. Real quick, we already answered that. What guitarists or musicians or artists really affected you at that kind of age that you could go back and go? I mean, obviously, you had said, what was his name? I missed it. The guy you talked to.
Gone.
No, the guy that your dad listened to all the time.
Oh, Oscar Peterson.
Oscar Peterson. I kept thinking of Charlie Parker. It's in my head. Sorry. So obviously that was there, maybe delayed. That was an influence. But what kind of other players, whether, because we're all influenced by guitarists and bassists, and Stanley Clarke for me is one of the greats, and Jocko of course is amazing, and more modern guys like John Myung and guys like you and stuff like that. So what guys can you pinpoint from back in that 70s 80s time frame that you were hearing all the time with your own thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, my older sisters had a great record collection, and I heard a lot of the sort of late 70s, early 80s stuff from, I mean, you're going into their room and pulling out like a Stranglers record, or
oh yeah,
they had the Police records, and also funnily enough, the Chic, the disco stuff. They had all that. I mean, that era of the sort of late 70s, there was a lot of fantastic upfront bass lines going on.
Man. Yeah. Who was the bass player for Chic? Who was the bass player?
Bernard Edwards.
That's right. Yeah, because Nile Rodgers was the guitarist, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, dude, that shit is insanely good, man. It's so good. And that, like the old, obviously the Marvin Gaye records and the Curtis Mayfield records, you just don't know. If you don't check that stuff out, you have no idea what you are missing. It is
There's awesome. loads of stuff. I can remember hearing first from my sisters. Even Can. Funnily enough, I'm a huge Can fan.
Okay.
But Can had a disco hit called "I Want More" in about 1979, 78. One of their last sort of things, and my sister had the single, which I was really surprised. Years later, when I discovered Tago Mago.
Tago Mago, I know, right. Yeah. I don't know that single though. I don't recall if I've ever.
I Want More. It's off an album called Flow Motion, which I think is about 78.
I'll have to check that out. I don't remember that one off the top of my head. So a lot of the 70s Motown stuff was pretty influential. Any hard rock guys, Chris Squire, the usual suspects?
No, I sort of bypassed a lot of that stuff. I think because, at that time, progressive rock from the 70s had sort of been and gone.
Right.
As a thing, so even the sort of bands like Yes had moved on to doing more commercial singles.
90125, right.
And well, the stuff that they were doing then didn't really bear much relation, certainly to my ears, to what I know them or what most people associate with, So I didn't latch on to that. I suppose Gong were a thing, I mean, they were sort of the only really progressive rock band, and also King Crimson.
Oh, of course, right.
I don't really know how, but I had Discipline and Beat.
So Tony Levin, big
the sort of the version with Tony Levin, Adrian Belew, and Bill Bruford. That era was the one that I heard a lot.
I want to argue one thing about what you said about Yes. The Drama album is the third best Yes album ever made. Sorry, just
yeah.
Smokes.
I mean, I've listened to them subsequently, later on, but at the time it was like I was saying before. I think it was something I saw as being from the past.
Right.
So I wanted to hear things that were more current or more up to date.
Were you into metal at that point in time? Were you starting to get into heavy metal, like Priest and Maiden, the new album stuff? And
no, I never really got into that, but I did get into a lot of the late punk stuff. I mean, you've got the Killing Joke T-shirt on there. I was a massive, still am huge Killing Joke fan. They're sort of, I think the first thing I heard was they had a hit single in the mid 80s called Love Like Blood, right?
Oh,
so that was the first thing I heard.
Amazing song.
It was great. I mean, it didn't sound like anybody else that I heard that I knew at the time. But then I went out and I bought a live album called Ha, which is like a mini album.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it was just the angriest thing I'd ever heard. It was so sort of, that's like a slap in the face. And that kind of discordant guitar and the sort of relentlessness of it, it was like, that was a real eye opener for me, but it's not really metal. They were more sort of I guess they've got metal in them, but they were I always thought of them as more punk, you know.
I always call them post-punk, nihilistic, early industrial. I mean, they're so influential on so many different bands. But you know what? You're gonna probably trip out when they're one of my favorite bands. I have every album, and Geordie is a god to me. That tone is just unmatched. Nobody does it. Nobody sounds like that guy. But and Jazz is fucking insane. He's just amazing. He's amazing. But you're probably gonna weird out if you had to guess, what album do you think is my favorite album of theirs?
Killing
Joke.
Probably the one. I mean, the one with Dave Grohl. You're probably going to say that, aren't you?
Not even close, man. Brighter Than 1,000 Suns.
The sort of 80s one.
Oh my God, I love that album. It is it's so beautiful, and of course, Nighttime is great too, with 80s and Kings and Queens and Love Like Blood, man, just so good. Yeah. And I know why you would like Love Like Blood, because it's like bum 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 bum.
Fantastic bassline, yeah. I mean but the whole 80s was very much a period of very, very upfront bass playing.
Oh yeah,
which just sort of tailed off. In the 90s, where you had bands like Oasis being massive.
Yeah, but you're right. Like
it's
right,
like being a very much a background.
Yeah, with stuff like Joy Division, the Chameleons, freaking Sisters of Mercy, like Lucretia. I think the best bass line ever is Lucretia, My Reflection. Love that song, man. So let's move on to your chronology here. You said there was a little bit, with an artist as prolific as you, I like to do the chronological narrative because it just keeps things a little more palatable.
Okay.
Organized.
What's that?
Organized.
Yeah. What were your first bands? Did you have a high school band that you did dances and any shows with, or what was the first?
No. So other than I remember doing the rock and roll musical at school. After that, and I went into a period of time where, when I left school, I thought I'll give it a go, being a musician. But of course, I didn't walk into a band at all. I just, I had a sort of succession of really awful jobs on a sort of part-time basis. And I used to spend the rest of my time working on playing and trying to get somewhere. Mm-hmm. And really, you go through a period, I went through a period of going to loads of silly auditions and getting into situations where I was really unsuitable. And then occasionally doing a gig that was great. And then I went on a jazz course. I just about learned how to play a walking bass line. And I went on a jazz course and I met a drummer there who put a little quartet together. And we were playing sort of all medium swing sort of standards, nothing too difficult. And I could just about do it, and we ended up playing, I think, a couple of times a week in a hotel.
Oh, really?
So that was sort of the first, not very interesting in a way, but that was the first opportunity I had to sort of get paid through playing the bass, which was a miracle, in a way. You sort of think, wow, because the rest of the time I was doing some terrible job, I mean, right. I worked in a factory where they made some chocolate drink, and you'd come out and blow your nose at the end of the day and you'd have chocolate in your
been there, done that, man. Been there, done that.
Terrible places, and I worked in a giant fridge at one point, moving sort of, and these were jobs, they weren't career moves. They were purely for the money, just so that I could go home. I'd do that for 3 or 4 days a week. I'd go home, I'd practice the rest of the time, or I'd try and phone people up, try and get gigs, or try and meet people, or go to jams or whatever. And then sometime after that, through this drummer, we ended up playing, the usual stuff that people do, which is sort of party bands and covers bands, and one person meets another person, but it's all working musician stuff. It's nothing. It's not. I still was involved in a few band projects, but nothing really went anywhere. And then I was able to get a gig playing with a blues band, and I wasn't really a blues fan.
I was gonna say, you don't struck me as a major blues guy for some reason.
Well, interestingly, it wasn't. It was purely just so I had a gig, because I looked at their calendar and they had 3 or 4 gigs a week all up and down the country, and it was like, great, I can. I mean, they were quite. was more just pubs and things, but they were better than the average pub band. They were quite good, you know.
Okay. What was the name of that band?
It was called Out of the Blue. So there's no trace of it anywhere now.
Okay.
I've looked,
Okay.
and interestingly enough, I found a cassette. We went to Denmark and played a blues festival, and I found a cassette of that gig 28 years later.
Wow. What year is this?
Like a film. Yeah. So it's September 1991. That was like a. So I actually found, and I was listening to myself from, you know, a 22-year-old me listening to it, and it's quite interesting. Cool. I hadn't probably heard it I mean, I collect things and then don't listen back to them, you know.
Was it a board recording? Like a board recording, or
it's just a desk recording? Yeah, really rough, you know, really rough. But funnily enough, unlike most desk recordings, the bass is really loud. So
that's unusual, right?
But I'm sort of listening to it, thinking about my thought processes at the time, you know, playing these kind of blues tunes, and they do things like Hendrix covers as well. So it was the heavier end of blues, if you like, you know.
That's cool.
But that was great. I did that for a couple of years, and I sort of got a bit bored of it. And that was around the time, as I sort of got fed up with that, was around the time Porcupine Tree started.
So how'd that come about? You and Steve went to school together, is that right, or no?
No, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So you were in high school together, or?
Yeah, that's right. So I knew him. He's a few years older than me, so he was in a different year at school.
Right.
So I knew him mainly through some other friends of mine that we had sort of people we knew. I mean, the thing about music is you gravitate, especially at school, you know, you gravitate towards the other people that play music and get to know each other, even if you're not in the same year group or whatever.
You clan.
Yeah, so I knew him back then. We had a sort of mutual friend. So I knew him through a couple of different connections initially.
And then, so 95, when did you graduate school then? High school?
Oh, well, I left in 1988.
You're out in 88. Okay, so you maintained some sort of a connection with Steve in terms of like he knew how to reach out to you, or how'd that end up going down?
Yeah. I used to see him every now and again. And I think initially I used to visit him. He had a huge record collection, and you know, unlike me, you know. So it was always interesting for me to go and see him because he always had stuff that, you know, had either just come out or that, you know, that I was curious to hear, you know. So we connected over all sorts of different music.
And then, so he just rings you up one day and says, "Hey, I'm doing this project and I need some live players," or because initially there was the guys from Japan that played with them, or no, that was No Man.
That was No Man. So I think I knew because I met Tim around his place once. That was the first time I remember meeting Tim. And I think that was when they were just about to do the No Man gigs with the Japan guys.
Okay.
But I think I'd done a couple of... I was interested enough in doing something creative that I'd been to see Steve and maybe we'd worked on some stuff together, but nothing came out of it, you know.
Right.
And I guess he gave me a couple of years even before Porcupine Tree became a thing. I remember him giving me the cassette with the silly booklet with all the made-up history.
Oh, the nostalgia, you know, farm stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I had that a long time before, and then it must have been a couple of years after that he had done the first album, and then he asked me to play on one track on Up the Downstairs. Right. But I didn't know it was going to be an album. It was just like, oh, I'm doing this track. Do you want to come and have a go? You know. Yeah. And it's going on an album. It's going to be released. So of course, it's quite exciting to me because I always love recording. You know. Yeah. And the idea of actually being on a bit of physical product for someone who'd just been scraping along doing live gigs, you know, like at the time for me was quite exciting. So
what song was it you were on? Were you on Up the Downstairs, right?
Yeah, I'm on the track. There's a track called Always Never.
Oh, you're on Always Never. That's right. You and Richard are on that, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think Richard's on one of the other tracks.
Not Beautiful. Yeah.
It's probably one of those ones. Yeah, it's one of the instrumental ones. I can't remember, but yeah. So and Steve was interested in doing the thing live, but I think it took a long time. It took a couple of years because I don't think he took it seriously because he was busy with No Man.
Right.
And let's face it, the music wasn't anything commercial.
No, it really wasn't.
You know, you wouldn't have thought there was an audience for it, you know.
So then, but at some point he wants to go live. And that's how you were initially brought in, to be the live guy, and then it morphed into being more the recording, or was it the other way around? I forget now.
Well, that was just a one-off, the Always Never, and I think the live band sort of came about during the genesis, the wrong word, genesis, thinking about the band. It just came about during the gestation period for the Sky Moves Sideways. I think that's kind of how it worked. So we played, initially the music that we played at the first gigs was just from the Voyage 34 and the cassette thing and from Up the Downstairs, and you know, and Sky Moves Sideways came a bit later. So I think he sort of more or less did a lot of Sky Moves Sideways on his own. I played on most of the tracks, and Richard played on most of the tracks, but it was still drum machines, I think, initially, the original pressing.
Right.
And then it was Signify, where we all started recording together, and Chris played the drum. Right. Yeah.
Quick technical question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I think by the time you started doing PT, you're already on fretless. And quick disclosure, I picked up bass because I don't know, I love music. Was like, I feels like I want to participate in it, even though I have no idea what I'm doing.
Well, that's exactly me. You know, that's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah, but so, and that was like 95, and then 90. You know, that's when I got into PT, and I heard PT, and that drove me to get a fretless probably way too early in what I was able to do. But how did that come about?
So I mean, I managed to get one quite early on, and I bought it off a guy at school who was a Mick Karn freak. And I knew this because he shaved his eyebrows off.
Oh, that's right. Mick did that. That's right.
Which we mercilessly ribbed him, of course. But about a year down the line, he wanted to sell this bass, and he knew that I was playing, and he came up to me and said, "Do you want to buy my fretless bass off me?" And I remember thinking, okay, you know, I mean, I didn't really have a clue. I knew at that point I'd been around Martin Elliott's house and listened to a few Jaco Pastorius records, and I knew the sound of the fretless, and I understood that Mick Karn was playing a fretless, and it was a different sort of sound that I really liked. And I also loved the Darley's Car album that he made with Peter Murphy.
Peter Murphy, yeah.
So I was sort of thinking, I had a little fantasy that I could play, you know, some of those bass lines, and of course they're so bizarre. But yeah, I picked it up, and the thing that somebody said to me, in fact, it might have been Martin, he said to me, if you learn to play a bit of fretless, it really helps your technique, because the difference between the fretted and the fretless is that with the fretted, the fret makes the note.
Right.
So you're holding the string down behind the fret, but the fret is actually in contact with the string. With the fretless, it's your finger directly on the board. So you've got the option to be expressive with it, but also you have to put a lot more thought into how you kind of play the note. So it's more physical. I've always enjoyed it from the point of view that it feels nice to me. It's physical feeling of sliding the note, and it, you know, it's harder because you can play out of tune, or you can make a mess of it, but at the same time it's more satisfying, and there's something about the process of it that I liked, the physical feeling of it. I mean, I was reading about young kids, you know, they say some young kids, you know, when they want to learn the clarinet or something, they like the sensation of blowing a reed instrument. It appeals to them initially when they're really young. So I went through this with my son, because he played the clarinet, and they were pushing him to play the oboe, but the oboe is a double reed.
Yeah.
You know, they always want oboe players, the same reason they need bass players, because there's not many of them.
Yeah, right.
He got himself like a junior oboe, and he hated it. He hated the feeling of the double reed, you know. So it's a sort of similar thing. I liked the feeling. I still do. I like and the same with the double bass. I like the sensation of the string. It sort of appeals to me. And that's deeper than, you know, I like the sound as well, but the whole thing for me, it's great. It's more satisfying in some way that I can't really explain.
I've never actually played a double bass or a fretless bass rather. I mean, or a fretless guitar for that matter. I've seen them, but I haven't tried them out. But do you get is there a much wider tonality sort of thing with that, where, you know, I mean, you're still going in, you're hunting for that fret once you know where you're going, but when you're moving that and sliding, you're getting different tonalities in that, I would think, right?
Well, it's more expressive. So I think of it now, you know, it can be very unforgiving when you record yourself and you listen back and you're a little bit out with the tuning. But I think of it, the way to think of it is that, you know, you don't want to sound like a sample. You know, we can sample the bass and tune it and it's perfect. But what makes it musical, and this is the same thing with a singer, you don't want to listen to an auto-tuned singer all the time.
Oh, God.
So you want to hear a bit of expression and a bit of a wobble to the note, and you know, but it's a judgment, isn't it? If there's a point where it just sounds out of tune and doesn't sound very nice. So it's sort of a constant shifting of your judgment as to, oh yeah, am I sharp, am I flat, you know? And I think the way that a good singer will use their voice expressively, it's almost the same thing.
So PT was not an overnight success. I mean, it was a pretty long slog uphill from the early 90s until you got signed by Lava, and then that kind of went kind of weird after 2 albums. But was there ever a time there when that was going on where you were like, man, you know, I'm not ready to bail? Maybe that's the wrong way to put it, but was there any times where you felt like, man, you know, I should be doing something different here? Maybe I should be thinking about doing something different.
Yeah, it was difficult at times because initially I think I just found it fascinating that I could play music that was a bit out of the norm, and it had an audience and it had some possibility for the future, because I could see the audience. You know, you go from one gig to the next and there were more people there. And then when we started going to places like Italy and Greece, where we actually had a reasonable audience, you know, we're playing maybe a 1,500 capacity club or theater or something,
right?
And then you start thinking, well, we could even be successful. You know, we could even have some sort of you know, we could even perhaps earn some money. You know, the money wasn't the driver, but it does come into it at some point, you know. But I started to think that, yeah, the band had a future, and you could sort of feel that. But it was, like you said, it was really, really, really slow. But then other times it felt frustrating because you know, we weren't getting much press. We were pretty much ignored. It's very much an underground thing, and you know, that again, that's the nature of the music. So most of the people that were coming along, it was word of mouth, and it takes so long to build that up. I mean, interestingly, I found a newspaper the other day. I'm clearing out my house, and I found an old Times newspaper from 1999. And I was thinking, why the fuck did I keep this? You know, like, it's just a paper from, it wasn't the Millennium paper, which I kept because of the Millennium. It wasn't anything I could reason, you know, any reason I could think. And I flicked through it, and there's loads of stuff about 1990, you know, like whatever it was. And then I found this tiny article where we got a mention, and it was the Times. And I thought, shit, that at the time, it was so rare to get a mention that I kept that. You know, I'd probably gone out and bought it because it was just so rare to get that one little mention, and that's outside of some prog fanzine or something.
Yeah, right. And that's probably what, Stupid Dream, I guess, right? In that.
Yeah, it was much, much later. Yeah.
That was on Absentia, I think, 99, right? So.
Oh, yeah, 99. Yeah, what did I wait?
I think it probably was, I don't know, it doesn't matter really, because I mean, we didn't really get any significant press, bar the odd article, until the major label thing, you know, until Lava.
When you did some session work in there, you started working with Jeff Lee and the XYZ Head during that period right after like 99, 90, you know, you didn't play on any, did you play on any No Man tracks?
Yeah, I've played on quite a few. Yeah.
What I thought. Now, and you were basically hired in by Steve and Tim to do the odd whatever, because you did some double bass too, right?
Yeah, I have to admit the chronology of No Man is a bit, I can't put it in my mind, because what would happen, and this happened with Tim Bowness years later when I did more work with him, is that I'd play on something and I'd forget about it because it wouldn't come out for 3 years later, or even longer sometimes, you know. So I remember doing the Returning Jesus tracks.
Right.
I remember we did a live thing with my friend Rick playing percussion, and I did some other tracks, but sometimes I would do them. And the thing is as well that sometimes I'm playing on them in a state where they're not fully formed.
Okay, right.
So I might play something and then I wouldn't hear it with Tim's vocal until much later. So I couldn't tell you what I did when. I don't think anyone could.
Probably not. Now, there was this thing, and both Serge and I were talking about this. The random noise generator thing was like 2003. Did that ever actually see, did that see a pressing? Did that come out? And because I don't.
Well, yeah, there was a CD we put out ourselves. That was an interesting thing for me because I think what I missed in some ways was what I did in the early days, which was get together with a group of friends once a week and just play. So the two guys in Random Noise Generator, Rob and Loz, we would get together every Sunday night and just jam in their tiny little studio. And they were obsessed with this idea of down tuning, or Rob was at the time. So I got into down tuning my bass, and it wasn't really a serious thing in a sense, because it was more about, it was like a social.
Yeah, just a hang.
It wasn't. There was no thought of doing an album or doing a tour or anything like that. But I quite enjoyed the music, and I think it gave me a bit of a focus to play down-tuned bass and play with the pick and use more distortion and all things that I did a lot more of later. So it was kind of useful as well,
All right. So what do you got, Serge? You got one?
Where are we now? So,
well, I got like two more PT things to go, and then
yeah, I think you can finish off the PT stuff.
Okay, so Porcupine Tree kind of hits the height of their popularity from, it kind of is weird for me because watching the In Absentia diary or what's it called, documentary was kind of like, and being pretty involved. I didn't work for you guys, but I was pretty involved. I was talking to Andy Leff a lot. I was dealing with that Karen lady a lot and getting all the samplers out and doing all that crazy.
The street team thing.
The street team thing, right? And I always thought that album did like really fucking killer. And it turns out that, it sold maybe 250,000 units, which is a lot, but it wasn't, I guess, what they had in mind. Can you speak a little bit about that? Like what that...
Well, the major labels at the time, everything's different now, of course.
Well, of course.
They were completely brutal about the numbers. So they weren't interested in having a long-term thing, I don't think. They saw us, they saw us as something a little bit unusual. And I think that we didn't do the numbers that they wanted, but we had some support from the guy who signed us. So that's why we were able to carry on. But it was probably a disappointment to them, I feel. They were expecting us to do a couple of million or something.
They were, really?
Well, because their other acts at the time, I think they had, funnily enough, The Cause. I mean, how many records do you think The Cause sold? I mean, they must have sold 15 million or something.
Was that the two chick singers?
I think it was three sisters and a guy.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah,
the
Irish band. That's right.
At the time, I mean, I've kind of forgotten them now. I've only just remembered them as I said it. But
I couldn't even tell you what they sang, though. I have no idea what that hit was.
They had, they had. I mean, for a couple of years, they were definitely mega selling. And I think one of the other acts was Kid Rock.
Kid Rock was. You're right.
Yeah, so there was a few label mates. So, it's a numbers game for them, or it was at the time. So they signed 10 bands, 15 bands. Two of them will outsell, or one of them will outsell all the others by such a huge amount that they don't really care about the others. They're happy to drop them and they'll move on to something else. So
and that's what happened during Deadwing, right? Like
Well, I can't really remember what happened exactly, because what happened basically is we went from Lava, and it was a difficult time, I think, because we weren't really doing the numbers in record sales, and they sort of stopped a lot of the tour support and stuff that we had before.
Yeah.
And there were, there's no denying there was mistakes made in terms of the logistics, which cost us money sometimes, and and it felt a bit difficult, but just further down the line from that, we went with Roadrunner.
You licensed it. You licensed the next album.
Yeah, and Roadrunner I can remember feeling, I was always very positive about them at the time, because they seemed quite aggressive with their marketing, which is probably what we needed, really.
Right. Yeah, that I don't know if you remember this, but Serge will remember. But during Deadwing, I can't remember. I sent Steve an email or something, and he's like, "Well, there may not be a tour." I was like, "Oh, you know, you guys playing here, here, and here." And he's like, "There may not be a tour. This is for the second leg of Deadwing, I believe it was." And he said we got dropped, and I'm like, "Wait, what? Like, how'd that happen?" And then me actually, and a friend of mine sourced all the like posters, and we got some stuff from Lhasa, and we put together all the posters and a lot of the tour swag, not the shirts and things like that, but like the print type stuff,
Okay.
which is crazy to think back to that. Now that's 17, 18 years ago now, but it's just crazy. I think back to that, I'm like, man, if I had to do that now, I'd never have the energy to do it.
Yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, energy. I mean, it's a minor miracle, really, to do any kind of tour. Really.
Yeah. Really.
So many factors have to come together until you get to a certain level, and then it gets easier. But the position we were in, I think, was that we hadn't, as far as the label was concerned, they didn't see us as a surefire bet.
Yeah, long-term viability.
Imagination. So we were struggling with getting taken seriously, probably, as a sort of ongoing concern for them.
And here's where it gets a little sticky, all right? Just a little. So, when you guys, really, I think the apex of the band's popularity would have been with Roadrunner and the Fear tour cycle, and probably somewhat into the Incident tour cycle. When you get to the end of the Incident, right, and in the States, the last place you played was Richmond, Virginia. I remember because I was down, and then you came back to do the thing in New York City at Radio City, but the last actual date was Richmond, Virginia in like June of 2010. When that was over, was there tensions in the band? Was there any sense that things might not continue on, that maybe you were going to take a long hiatus?
No, my understanding at the time was that we would, have time off, which I think we all needed.
Right.
Because it was kind of exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly was for me, because I had young kids at the time.
Right.
But I think we'd all, we'd been on a very intense tour period for quite a long time. We hadn't really had a break. So the idea initially was always to have a year off, and then come back together again. And then
it didn't happen that way.
It didn't happen that way. Yeah.
Was there any kind of communications about that in terms of like?
Well, no. The short answer is no. So Steve just sort of carried on. I mean, he did his solo tour, which I expected him to do.
And then, which would have been for the Insurgentes thing, I believe, and then
like 2012 or whenever that was.
Oh no, you know what? It would have been for Grace, for Drowning. Yeah, because
okay. So and then there was never any sort of discussion about doing anything.
That's bizarre to me.
Well, no, he didn't ever turn around and say, "Oh, I don't want to do it anymore," or "Let's do it next year." There was none of that. There's no sort of timeline.
No, nothing.
Complete silence. And I always got the impression that anytime anyone mentioned it, doing anything, occasionally it would pop up about, "Oh, why don't we release the acoustic stuff we did for the Royal Albert Hall show?" And he would never reply. So. Clearly, you've got no interest then.
Wow. All right. So the last question then, and it's the toughest one, and you can opt out on it. Were you surprised to find out that an album had been recorded without your participation and knowledge? I think based on the answer you just gave to the last question, probably not. But until it was all finished and a deal had been secured and major label machinery had already begun to process everything. I know this is a touchy subject. I know you've kind of answered it in the Premier Guitar thing. Do you want to opt out, or can you give me any?
Well, no. I mean, the fact is that whether the album was planned as a Porcupine Tree album without my participation, or whether it worked out that way because of the momentum of the
right,
whatever went on behind the scenes. I don't know, because I was never informed. I just got a message that oh, we've made a record, and oh, by the way, I've played all the bass, and it's a bit different to you, so maybe you wouldn't want to do it, and actually we're going to use the name and put the record out. It was like that. It was like, so there wasn't really any discussion, there was no phone call, there was no sort of and from my perspective, there was no, as far as I could work out, there was no interest at all from Steve to do anything with Porcupine Tree again, because I think when after 5 years, I thought, oh, maybe we'll do something. And then maybe after 10 years, I thought, well, he's obviously not going to, he's not going to bother, why? But I suppose maybe I don't really buy the thing that the album was, like in the press release, they said something like the album was 12 years in the making. I think that's
I don't believe that at all.
Either they had a discussion between the three of them about cutting the cake between 3 and not 4, right, or whatever. I don't know. I'm not privy to any of that anymore, so that's fine. But yeah, it was a surprise to me, of course.
So there we go. That was the answer I was curious about. You don't have to say anymore. I will say a little bit, and then we'll move on. And what I have to say is that, Serge is cringing right now. His butthole's puckering up. He's like, "Oh God, he's gonna say it. He's gonna say something crazy." I had intimated to you, Colin, that that I just suddenly was a non-person to that person, out of nowhere. 2013, that person walks out of the green room, stares right at me like I don't even exist, and goes back in the green room. I thought, wait, what? Like, okay, I know we weren't like besties. We didn't like exchange birthday cards and shit, but like, what happened there? Like, okay, so I guess I was looked at as the crazy, weird fanboy. I'm not. I know there's people way crazier than I am, dude. Way crazier than I am. But it was, I don't get that, and I'm going on record to say it's bullshit. We can move on. So there you go.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I'm kind of grateful that although there's a continuing interest in Porcupine Tree, even though I'm not part of it anymore, and I'm not, well, the manner in which I was let go, if you like, was kind of very uncool. For me, I recognize that it means a lot to a lot of people. You know? So I'm really grateful for that, and I'm always happy to when I do a gig somewhere and someone comes up, and a lot of people seem to think I haven't done anything for years.
No, you've been very.
I'm always quite happy to talk about Porcupine Tree. I'm really happy that it's touched a lot of people. Because I would never have envisaged that when I was first involved in it. I didn't think it would necessarily have a future, and it was a few years before that it seemed like any sort of possibility.
Well, 2 addendums to that, and then we will move on, I promise. The first thing is that you should have been afforded the opportunity to play in front of 15,000 people down in Chile, okay? I don't know what the fuck happened here, but the last time I saw you guys, there was about 700 people tops at the place I saw you at, not including the Radio City show. Keep in mind, the Radio City show brought a lot of people in from all over the country, and in fact, the UK. I met Simon, the guy that was doing Carbonation. He flew in for that gig.
Oh, I remember him, yeah.
So you should have been afforded that. That's my take, not yours. That's my take, okay? The second thing is, man, what I understand went down with Wes was not cool either. So that's all I'm going to say. Anyway, moving on.
Let me just jump in real quick, just from a personal perspective, not on that stuff, but on the last kind of like era of fear and so on, because you mentioned that's when you became a parent, and I'm just curious now that I have a toddler. Right, I know I came into the game late. How did you possibly manage to be in a rock band while being a father of young children? How was that? How did you do that?
I have to big up my wife, really, because it was a bit of a struggle. I mean, I think she remembers the struggle more than anything else. So despite the success or whatever, for her, she was having to juggle 3 children. We did have some childcare issues. It's a very challenging thing to have a parent, and it was probably insane to have 3 under 5 and go on tour. But we managed it. We're still together.
I was going to say, you're lucky you're still married, dude.
So,
Right. So,
I mean, I was explaining to a friend of mine the other day, my middle son was actually born while I was on tour in America, and he was premature. So we had naively thought, like a lot of parents do, that the first child had been late. So maybe the second one will be late. So we'll be fine. I'll be back from tour and I'll be at home, and you'll have, he'll cut, the baby will be born and everything will be fine. And then I remember waking up in Nashville, and there's loads of messages on my phone. I phoned my mother-in-law and she's saying, well, don't you know? I said, well, what's going on? She says, well, Claire's in hospital, so, and then I had to say, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, because he was premature. He was in an incubator.
Okay.
And my wife, she was very good about it. She said, even if you come home, there's nothing you can do other than hold my hand. There's nothing you can do. You can't do anything. So you have to be there. I mean, if for me to walk out of the tour was impossible in a way, because even if they'd have replaced me, they couldn't have got anyone from the UK who needed an American work permit in time.
Right.
And what would I have done? I'd have gone home for a few weeks, and then the tour would have finished anyway. So that was really tough. That was the toughest moment. But, she's a bit of a diamond, my missus.
It sure sounds that way.
I have to say, it was also quite funny where I went into the hospital to see him, my son. He was at this point maybe 3 weeks old, and he'd just come out of the intensive care. And I walked into the room where there were 4 babies, and I said to the nurse, I've come to see my son. And she's looking at me like, yeah. I said, well, I don't know which one he is.
That had to be really weird.
My wife's been saying to the nurses, oh yeah, my husband, he's in America at the moment, but he's definitely coming home. And they're going, of course he is, dear.
Yeah. Oh, right. Like I got you. I got you. Hey, we'll let actually Edward Antoine, I think his name is here. We'll let him have the last word about that. With a former high school mate, he was talking about how the email and all that stuff, he's graduated in 79, which means he's a little bit older than me. He says P3, I think he means PT's excuse as to why Colin is no longer in P3 is utter fecking bullshit.
I like the way he spelt bullshit.
I do too. That's some serious classy shit there, Edward. We like
That's
that.
That's creative. I like that.
Let's move on from that, because I'm sure I'll get a cease and desist NDA too. So bring it. Anyways, let's tackle O.R.k. Man, I got to tell you, dude, I knew about this band. I knew you were in this band. But I'm Mr. Music nerd that has 80 million CDs, and I'm constantly buying this. And and I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't really listen to PT much anymore. In fact, I never even picked up the new PT album, not because you're not on it, just because I didn't think it was all that great, to be honest with you. Porcupine Tree for me as a sweet spot is pretty much Sky through, I gotta be honest with you, Deadwing, dude. I'm not a huge Fear guy. I go back to it and I'm like, other than Anesthetize, I'm just not taken with that album. And The Incident, there's a couple good songs on it. The jam songs on the second disc are pretty good, but the actual album itself, Blind House is cool. But
yeah, I mean, my only thing was I was really happy with all the records, and I think they've all got their moments.
Oh, sure.
Moments. I think actually my 2 favorites are In Absentia and Fear of a Blank Planet.
I'm not as big on Fear as a lot of people. I love In Absentia. I freaking love Signify. There's just something special. It was my first album I got, so it's special for me. But I do think towards the end it was, to me, again, this is my take on it, it was just starting to feel like Steve was repeating a lot of ideas for me.
Well, I think for me, that we, in retrospect, there were ideas in the song cycle big piece that we should have expanded on.
Yeah, exactly.
you know, maybe rather than, I mean, he had this concept to keep it as a song cycle and flow it like this. But I thought there were bits that were really strong.
Yes.
But maybe would have been, you know, this is years later, of course.
Right.
There were bits that maybe would have benefited from expanding on, and there were other bits that were just way too long. I didn't really go for like Time Flies at all. I thought that was
too long.
It was also a little bit of, for me, almost a pastiche.
Yeah, very much so. Like Neon Disconnect was a really cool tune that should have been 3 minutes long or 4 minutes long, and it's just kind of, you know, you get it for 1 minute and 5 seconds or something, and you're like, I never go back to that album, Colin. And I do like help me out on the second side. What's the first song? Charlatans? No, what's it called? See how much of a fanboy I am? I can't remember the damn song. Like the stuff, Black Dahlia from Richard's a cool tune, and Remember Me Lover's kind of an okay tune. I'm not a Bonnie the Cat guy. You guys, you know, you guys did get, with Gavin coming into the fold, there was a different energy, obviously, because of what kind of drummer he is. But I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I didn't really want to hear you guys doing epic prog metal songs. I could go listen to Dream Theater do that shit, you know. I wanted to hear that.
It does divide people. I know that the energy was different in the earlier days.
It was, and
only. I mean, I hadn't, to be honest. I haven't listened to it for years and years, but I did listen to the recent Greek gig that's gone out on Bandcamp. I did get sent a copy of that before it went up.
Okay.
I got sent the file, so I took the time to listen to it because it was a board tape, and it was nice to hear that because I haven't listened to that era of PT forever. You know, probably, and I was completely unaware that recording existed.
Like, is that all stuff that's that's all Signify and Sky and?
Yeah, it's we do Sky Moves Sideways and all the really old stuff, and I think it's from '97. So that's, I mean, you might want to check that out. I'm just saying because the live energy of the band's quite apparent, even though it's a kind of a slightly compromised recording in terms of the fact that it's a desk tape.
The big thing I loved about PT was Steve's vocals. When he started to try to be, and this isn't a shit on Steve thing. If Steve sees this, man, he can reach out to me and that's cool, whatever, but I don't care. When Steve started to try to be a rock singer, it didn't work for me nearly as much. When he was doing stuff like Cure for Optimism and Smart Kid and the, you know, the stuff that's the bucolic British sounding thing, it was special. When he started doing stuff like Halo and Shiver, and it wasn't as much there for me. But I still think that, you know, Deadwing for me is the last great album, and stuff like Mellotron Scratch and Glass Shattering Arm, and those are very special songs. Even Deadwing's a really cool song, but I just, you know, that's what I heard on the new album where I'm like, he's trying to be a rock star, man. I'm just not digging it. I don't get it. And look, he's playing gigs to 15,000 people. So who am I? Nobody. I get it, you know, but it's just, you know, I'm a guy that was buying all that stuff in the early days, coming to all the shows. I still have the record in the US, as far as I know, of going to the most shows. I saw 53 shows. Now, you guys are very kind and let me go to
as many as me.
Well, let's move on and get into O.R.k, and then because I don't want to keep you. Can we have you about 2 hours? That'd be about another 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine, man.
Okay, we'll get you out of here. That's so tackling this insane list of bands. This you put out Screamnasia. Well, actually, you've got 4 albums out with O.R.k. This is the 4th one that just came out October 21st, 22 on K-Scope. Screamnasium. I got to tell you, this is I'm being honest. This is the first time I'm checking the band out, and man, I was like, how did I not know about this? Why did I not know about this? There's so much creative risk taking on this album, and I don't know what the other stuff sounds like, but I imagine it's in a similar vein. But there's so much experiment, you know, from an experimental standpoint, yet it's super incredibly catchy and melodic. And man, this guy LEF, what the fuck, dude?
Left, yeah.
What the hell?
He is. I hope he's not watching because I don't want to give him an ego problem. But
no, we don't want to do that.
I rate him very highly. He's and he was a surprise to me because I met him through Araldo Bonocchi when we were doing Metallic Taste of Blood, which is still ongoing. But anyway, I met him. He works a lot with Araldo, and I didn't really have any idea about him. He sort of came along to a gig we were doing, and we got on really well. Like socially, we were having a drink and stuff, and then he had this vague idea that we could do something together. And I think I heard him sing. He had a project with my bass playing friend Lorenzo Feliciati from Twinscapes. He had a project called Berserk, which is really experimental, really unusual. And I really liked Berserk. I thought it was marvelous, but it wasn't anything like O.R.k. The music's very, very different. It's much, much stranger. And he said to me, well, I got this idea, you know, that you and me could do a record with Carmelo Pipitoni, who I didn't know either, Italian guitar player, who's actually quite well known in Italy. And I thought, well, I'll give it a go, you know. So I said, yeah, let's see what we can do. And the first track he sent me was a track called Pyre from the first record. And immediately I could hear two things that I hadn't realized. The first thing, it's going to be great for me because I can hear the space.
For your bass.
Yeah. Familiar territory, but it's different. So that's nice. And the second thing is I thought, well, he's actually got a really, really amazing voice.
You know, I'm going to throw this at you and see if you agree. I'm sure you will, but this guy is like a DNA. It's like somebody went in and took the DNA of David Sylvian, okay, Jeff Buckley, and Chris Cornell. It's like I'm hearing this guy and I'm going, "Are you fucking kidding me?" The screams, the Buckley, beautiful Buckley melodic thing, and then that Sylvian lilt when he's doing the more quiet, mellower stuff. I'm like, that sounds like David Sylvian. Oh wait, that sounds like Jeff Buckley. And I even hear weirdly a little bit of I don't know how to say his name, Mariah's Duda from Riverside.
Oh, okay, yeah.
A little bit of Riverside in there. And this guy, again, man, you know, Lef, if you're watching, get off the ego trip thing, man. You know, we're just a bunch of dudes talking about you. But dude, you are.
The thing is that I know for a fact that he didn't know David Sylvian at all, because when we did the first album, that was the thing that a lot of the reviews picked up on.
I didn't read any reviews. That's my own.
Oh, there were a few reviews, you know, like this guy in moments, he's got this kind of Sylvian-esque delivery. And he said, I don't know, you know, why are they saying that? I don't even know David Sylvian. I think obviously he knew Cornell and he knows Jeff Buckley.
Right.
But I think that the fact that he's got you know, there aren't many really strong male vocalists. I mean, I can hear a bit of Mike Patton in there occasionally.
A little bit in that when he gets into that kind of crazy part of his voice. Yeah.
There's a bit of Mike Patton in there, but you know, he's his own man.
Do you hear the Sylvian though?
Not so much on the new record. On the first one, yes, I do, but not so much on the new one. I think I don't think of it in terms of comparison. I can hear now people are making the Cornell comparisons, but I just think, oh, it's Lef. You know, it's what he does. You know, he's a very powerful singer, and he's actually trained. He's a trained singer. He's sung Puccini before. He's sung opera.
Serge, we're getting a lot of feedback, man. You want to chime in, and I'll go ahead.
Yeah,
Serge, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that Lef's got a lot of classical training.
Yeah, it's. I mean, what I love about O.R.k. is how many different things you can do and pull it off well, especially over the 4 albums. And I did like you had some pretty cool guests. I know you worked with Serge Tankian with was it Black?
That's right.
Yeah. Which is interesting. And if I remember correctly, reading that came about because of Bill Laswell.
That's right. So Lef did a solo album and called Hypersomniac a few years back, and Bill Laswell played bass on I think pretty much all of it, except maybe 1 or 2 tracks. And Bill Laswell suggested that Lef and Serge would make a good team. And he put Lef in touch with Serge Tankian, which was great because it worked, actually. It was a good it was a very good combination. You know, they kind of complement each other.
Yeah, I thought that was a very cool fit, and I love Bill Laswell's work in general, which
I'm a major Laswell fan. Yeah, major.
Spans quite a lot of territory on the spectrum.
Yeah. I think you can't dip your toe into Bill Laswell. You got to dive in because there's so much.
I was gonna say he's only got about 4,000 albums.
Yeah.
But honestly, reviewing all your projects up to date, it kind of made me think of it, where there's so much different things going on, you know, different aspects of your playing, which I thought was very cool. And
is this a total collaborative effort? Everybody's writing in the band, and how did Pat get involved?
Well, we were I think we sort of did the first track, maybe a couple of tracks on our own, and we were getting ideas together for a drummer. And Pat, I mean, I sort of knew Pat, but only on a sort of nodding basis because I'd met him when Stickmen opened up for Porcupine Tree, so I didn't know him personally.
Right.
And then he played on a couple of other tracks that I was involved in, I think with Timbo Ness, and so I knew what he was about, and I've seen him play, and I thought he'd be a great choice. And Lef was going, well, you know, Pat would be great for this, you know. And I was saying, you know, I'd love Pat to do it, but I'm sure he's going to be too busy because he's doing
too big. He's too big, right? Yeah,
he's doing hundreds of things. But we sent him the tracks, and he really, really liked them. But he did say, look, guys, I can't get to this for a little while, so you're just going to have to wait. So we thought, well, why not? We'll just wait for Pat. And of course, he did a marvelous job, you know. And I think there's something, it's difficult to quantify, but I think in the same way that I felt it was a good context for me, I think obviously Pat felt the same way because, you know, I can't imagine, his contributions are fantastic, you know, and he's great. He does something in a way that I can't really articulate because there's always a bit of magic in the ideas that he comes up with. They're really sort of quite unexpected, you know, at times, and quite unique.
Yeah, that's one thing that really jumps out about. Well, obviously, Lef's singing is, you know, a feature of the album because it's so dynamic and all and engrossing. But Pat's playing on this Screamnasium is killer, man. It's just so. And I'm not a guy that really focuses on the drums a lot. They're kind of usually my least. As a guitarist, I'm listening for solos and guitar riffs and vocals and stuff, vocal melodies. But man, his playing on this album is just absolutely fabulous, man. What's that like working with a guy like him versus like a Gavin? You've gotten to work with some really killer drummers. We're going to talk about another one on our project coming up here in a sec, but what's it like?
The thing about Pat is he does a lot of very unexpected things.
Right.
Well, actually, Gavin did as well, but Pat is kind of in a different area. It's sort of interesting. I don't want to sort of analyze it too much because it's sort of part of the enjoyment. It's sort of, you know, not always knowing what he's going to do, but he has this way of playing quite busy things, but they don't get in the way. They still support everything, you know, really, really well. And he's got the right judgment about that. You know, he doesn't just fill up all the space. So it's busy. It's quite hard to do that, to be busy and interesting, but to be, you know, appropriate. Otherwise,
not to drag the focus
over everything. Right.
Yeah.
And it just fits together really well. You know, the music on a musical level with Carmelo as well. Carmelo's sort of one of these people that's a little bit on the edge.
Yeah.
You know, with his playing in terms of like, sometimes you think it's all going to go crazy.
I noticed that. Too. Yeah.
He's got that little edge in there, and I don't really want to analyze that too much because I've played with him enough to know that we can follow him. You know, he gets excited sometimes when we play live and we just kind of go into something together. So there's a lot more spontaneity. You know, we're playing set songs, but there's a lot of spontaneity around the way we tend to play them live. So it takes a particular mindset to approach that. We're not just regurgitating a set format all the time.
How do
the one thing I took away from the album was that there's this kind of shifting, complex dynamics going on in between you three guys in particular. And I guess Left does keyboards and synth and things like that, right?
Yeah, he does, yeah.
But but there's a lot of dynamics where it almost sounds like the three of you guys are, I don't want to say you're playing different things, but you're almost like puzzle pieces fitting in around each other in a weird way. And it's not just some linear, okay, we're playing 4 bars of this and we're playing 4 bars of that, and then we're gonna, it's gonna be the E chord here and it's the D chord there and that's the D minor there, and that's not going on in this stuff. But yet again, everything sounds super melodic and catchy, that shouldn't happen.
I'm really glad that you said about the jigsaw element, because Carmelo's a really interesting guitar player.
He very much is.
He uses unusual voicings and unusual sort of patterns and things, and not always, but I try when I can to do something that works against him rather than just follow. I mean, a lot of the time I have to, guitar and bass, you have to bang out a riff together. So that I'll do that when I feel it's appropriate. But a lot of the time I like to play and just go away from what he does and then come back to at certain points. So we're sort of meshing between each other.
I picked up on that. I definitely picked up on that. And that's,
I
don't think you'd maybe necessarily pick up on that if you weren't a player, but you just hear it and it is what it is. But if you're a player, you can kind of pick up on those subtle nuances. Serge, you wanted to say something. I'm sorry.
No, talking about the live aspect. So 2 questions. One is, how would you compare playing live of O.R.k versus what you did of PT? I think, especially maybe later, I think PT felt like it was a bit fairly structured in terms of what you were doing live.
Production. So,
yeah, well, because we ended up doing this show where the video aspect became quite important. And there were times where it sort of felt a little bit like being a part of a computer program in a way, because we had to play to the format of the film. So it was still enjoyable, but it took away the ability for us to do certain things because we had to follow the sort of structure really much closer. So with O.R.k, there was, I mean, in truth, when we did the first tour, we only had the first album's worth of material, and we knew that we were going to have to stretch out to have enough material to play a gig. So there's a track on the first album called Vuoto, which means empty in Italian. It's the one that Carmelo sings. And on the record, it's a really short 3-minute kind of rock song. And we stretched that out to sort of, a 7-minute freak out, and it was great. I really enjoyed that. And in fact, we did that in the very early days with Porcupine Tree, because Not Beautiful Anymore was just really a few riffs. And we used to jam that live to sort of, 8-9 minutes. So I like having the opportunity to do that again in a way.
For sure.
That's great to have that. But everyone in the band's got to be open to that and comfortable with that for it to work,
I did notice watching the live videos, you had a mic in front of you, which I think I've not seen before. Have you been doing a little singing there?
Well, Lef has encouraged me to do backing vocals. And that started when we had a band called O.R.k together. So at the time, Lef was singing in no known language before he was comfortable singing in English. He used to sing in a sort of made up language.
Like Cocktail Twins.
A few key moments in the set where he said, like, I really want you to sing this part with me, or this part that's on the record that I can't do, or I don't want to do, or whatever. And I was like, well, I can't really do it, Lef, And he just said, no, it doesn't matter. Just try, just keep trying, and we'll. So I'm kind of grateful because it's fun sometimes to sing. It can make you feel quite connected. I've spent years playing the bass and not saying anything. And sometimes in a gig, just to sort of sing a line or a note or something, it can make me feel a bit more like I'm there in a way, in a way that I didn't before.
So do you think O.R.k will make it to the States at some point?
I was wondering that too, yeah.
Yeah, no, we really hope so. It's very challenging, is all I can say. We really want to do it, even though we've got an American in the band. It's very challenging to get.
Well, the visa situation is not easy, and it's expensive. You guys, know that more than anyone with a band that tried to really hammer all that space in between there. If you got a day off, it's costing you massive amounts of money.
I mean, I would just say, this question comes up whenever we release any tour dates. Someone will write to me and say, why aren't you playing here? And the reality is, I think I would just say, there's nowhere we don't want to play.
Right.
We really like playing the music live, and we want to take it everywhere we can. but it's just reality and logistics when we don't go somewhere. You know, we really want to go to America, and everywhere we've been, we've really enjoyed it, and I think the opportunity to play will come at some point. You know, we did have an opportunity late last year, but it slipped away. So I think it will happen at some point, and I really hope so.
Serge, I'm shocked you haven't asked this question yet. The last thing on this, and then we'll move on quick here. Well, come on, man, the artwork. Come on, dude. You're not gonna ask?
No, go. You can ask.
Well, how? I mean, you're the Tool fanatic. How did Adam Jones get involved in doing artwork for you guys?
So Pat knows Adam quite well because King Crimson opened for Tool, so they're quite good friends. And I think when we did Ramage Head, Adam submitted an image to Pat. I don't know if Pat asked him. Pat must have asked him at some point, because we'd been through using the same artist for the first two records, and I think we felt that the Ramage Head was a bit different, and we wanted to maybe try somebody else, but we didn't know where to go. So Pat must have suggested, I'll ask Adam, and we thought, yeah, okay, you know, like he's going to bother.
Yeah, right.
But no, he came up with Ramage Head, the Ramage Head image, and we all really liked it straight off. And it's an abstract thing, but I felt that it just it fit the music, you know.
Oh, super cool.
It was the right image. So, of course, when we did the Screamnasium record, we had a list of titles, of which Screamnasium was one. And we sent them all to Adam just to spark some ideas, you know. And he said he really liked the title Screamnasium. So I thought we're great, because that was one I thought of. So it's nice. It's nice to have a bit of validation. And then he sent a load of imagery, but it was really late, you know, really late coming. And he sent this one little video of an exploding skull, and it was like, this is amazing, but you know, we need something within the next kind of 2 weeks, or we're going to miss the deadline for everything. And then right at the last minute, he did it all perfectly, and it's a fantastic image. But
it's super cool.
The image actually comes from an animation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little film which is around somewhere. You can see that with the skeleton holding up its hands
on YouTube. I think it is. Yeah.
And it's a very, very high res image. So Dennis Rodia actually went in and picked out some images to use. So he did the sort of package design, if you like. So I have to give Dennis a lot of credit as well. He's done a great job choosing the parts of the animation that we've ended up using. But I love it. It's great. I think it's a great image.
That's super cool. If you, did you ever meet him though? Because like
I haven't met him. I met Danny Carey. Yeah.
I met him because of you guys. Yeah.
But I never met Adam. No.
I believe this is Isabel from Spain. Easter Shacks, I'm guessing. You know her? You remember her? Remember Isabel?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Yep. She's asking. I'm late. Hoping. Yeah, Isabel. It'll be up on my YouTube page. You'll be able to pull it up, and probably when we wrap here in about 30 minutes or so, roughly, it has to render, so it might take a little bit of time. But we got to carry on. We got to get a few more things in here real quick. Fractal Sextet. Man, I'm glad you said something about this, because I missed it in your page when I said, hey, is there anything I'm missing here? And you're like, yeah, I think you might want to mention this one. Dude, that is killer. And I think the first track sounds like early PT. The rest of it doesn't. Just that whatever it's called, Zoetrope. Yeah. What's the deal there? What, 5 or 6 of you guys working on the sixth?
Yeah, so it's really the sort of originator is the keyboard player Fabio and Stefan Thalen, who I know. I don't really know Stefan, but I was familiar with his work with his band Sonar, which is really interesting minimalist music, and they use an unusual tuning, and there's lots of cross rhythms and unusual time signatures, and it's a fascinating listen, but it's really specific about the territory it's using. There's not much melodic stuff going on. It's rhythmic and drone based, and it's quite sort of well, it's like a lot of minimal music. It's just taking one aspect of music and really exploring it.
Right.
You know,
a lot of pulses, kind of like pulsing.
Yeah, cross pulses and stuff. So Stefan, I knew what he did, and I was really fascinated and really happy for the opportunity to do some stuff with him, because I've loved Sonar, you know. And John Durant and him, John I've been working with for a lot of time with O.R.k Belief and stuff. So John and him had kicked off a couple of tracks together, and John does sort of the opposite to Stefan. So he's doing a lot of solo melodic stuff in the music. So he's kind of expanding it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And unusually, the drums came last. So
that drummer is killer. He is great.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really, really happy that he was able to do it. We were going through, you know, Stefan saying to me, I don't really know who to ask to play drums on this, because I don't want to use the guys from Sonar. You know, I want to try some new people.
Yeah, right.
And all the same names came up, and I'd been watching a video. This is the power of YouTube. I've been watching a video on Moroccan rhythms, and I'd somehow got directed to this drummer, Yogev Gabe, and I checked out his channel, and he's presenting all these really complicated ideas, but he does it in a really fun, entertaining way, and he can clearly play. Mm-hmm. So I said to Stefan, you know, you have to ask this guy. I think he's going to really connect with the music. I think he's the right person. So this was, you know, all during the pandemic, so we couldn't get together anyway. So I think it took a bit of time for Yogev to come over and Switzerland and record the drums, but he did a fantastic job, you know. Any
possibility this may, I know this is a tricky one, because you're talking about a multi-international band trying to get everybody. Would you be cool to do some gigs if you could get gigs? Because this would be a fun, cool show for a music head to go to and just zone, because there's so much space to improv and do a lot of cool shit with it. It just seems like you could. But I guess it would probably be tough to get something like this on a stage, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, just to get us all in the same room is thousands of dollars, you know. I'm not saying it won't happen. Logistically, it's going to be a challenge, but it would be amazing. I mean, I think we'd all be up for it. So there was some discussion a while ago about if it was possible, would we all like to do it? And of course, you know, I said yes, and I'm pretty sure everyone else did as well. So.
And everybody's, what are the nationalities again? How many from where?
Well, so Stefan's from Switzerland. I'm in the UK.
Right.
Yogev is in Israel. Fabio's Italian, so I think he's in Rome or Naples or somewhere. And Andy is also Swiss, the percussionist, Andy Papato.
Yeah, that's a lot of
everybody. John in the USA. Yeah,
that's a lot of logistics right there, man. A lot of
money.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Anything on that one for you, Serge? You want to hit on that at all?
No, I think you hit a key points, but yeah, I definitely encourage everybody to listen to it.
Well, I've had a lot of people say to me, like you, Jeff, that it sounds a bit like PT.
Just the first track.
I don't think I heard it personally. I think, you know, I hear some parts of your other projects in there a little bit, but again, that's because you're in it. So
here's what I heard. I heard a little bit of Moon Loop in that first track. Just that spacious sort of ambient swirl of the keyboards, and that really cool, I think it's like 3 or 4 notes that the keyboard plays on the piano, haunting, kind of really that. I tell you what, that album's great for driving, man. Put that thing in, get on some back roads, get that sucker up, and just go like a bitch. You know,
it's very hypnotic. It's exploring all that space. You know, that real hypnotic trance sort of state. You know.
How about we talk about Another World real quick, which Serge and I, unbeknownst to each other, when we got together quickly here before you came on, I'm like, dude, I think I like that album the best of all of his solo stuff. The one with Robert Jurgendahl.
That's right, yeah, Robert Jurgendahl, yeah.
And Ian Dixon, and I know why I love it, because it's got Ian Dixon's insanity all over. It's just so gorgeous and so lush and just a beautiful album, man. So cool. Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I met Robert when that was through Tim Bowness, actually. So Tim had a thing called Slow Electric, which was him and Peter Chilvers and Robert and Alexei from Estonia. So I met them when we played in fact, we played in Kiev in Ukraine. So I met them there, and Tim had always said we were going to do another Slow Electric record. He was going to do another Slow Electric record, and because I'd played live with them, which was just a sort of accident really that happened, that I would be involved in the next record. And I started writing a few pieces, and I gave them to Tim. And then Peter Chilvers, who was playing the keyboards, he went off and, well, he got the job working for Brian Eno.
Oh, that's right.
He got super busy, and he just wasn't available. So everything got kind of pushed to nowhere. You know, just nothing happened. There's this kind of half written ideas. So a couple of years later, and I kept in touch with Robert, and I think he came to England to play. Estonia is one of these countries that subsidise their musicians when they go abroad. So he came to play somewhere in England as part of a festival, and you know, it's a very cool thing. You get your government pays for you to go and you showcase your country. It's great. Mm-hmm. So we met up, and I think maybe it was then, and I said, well, I've got these ideas, you know, that we never did anything with. Should we work on them together, you and me? So that was how it started. And Ian Dixon is somebody I've known for years and years.
Yeah, well, Returning Jesus, he's all Rain does.
Well, even years before that. Ian played in a jazz band. I used to play every Friday lunchtime in an art centre.
Oh, really?
When I first got a double bass, it was like a funny thing because I met a bass player, a friend of mine, and his wife had thrown him out. And he was living in this art centre for free upstairs in one of the rooms. Okay. And he persuaded the art, as a way of kind of paying rent, he persuaded us all to go and work, do a lunchtime gig in this art centre. And we'd all get fed.
Oh, there you go.
He could sort of justify his existence.
Right.
You know, or he could justify his stay by saying, well, I'm bringing a bit of, you know, there's a gig every Friday, you know, but it was great because it was a great experience, you know, learning experience. And that's where I first got double bass. He taught me into getting a double bass because we were playing these jazz tunes and I've been playing electric only, you know. So I had a bit of encouragement there. And Ian used to come along and play trumpet because him and Wayne, this friend of mine, they had a band called Ute, U-T-E.
Okay.
And it was like jazz kind of hip hop sort of crossover thing. A bit like Us Three, if you remember them. You know, Us Three did a version of Herbie Hancock's Cantaloupe Island or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And, you know, sort of people did, Ronnie Jordan did So What as a sort of jazz tune, but a hip hop thing, you know. Mm-hmm. So they had this project that I think they ended up getting signed to a major label when it went very sour. But anyway, that was great. So we had this once a week gig, and I met Ian really and got to play with him a lot through then. And I introduced him to Steve when he was looking for a trumpet player because I said, look, this guy's amazing. You know, he does a lot of stuff with electronics.
Yes.
He does a lot of stuff where he extends the range of the trumpet. So he plays very low notes, which is unusual because most trumpet players go the other way.
They go high, right.
And he's got fantastic phrasing. I mean, he's got a lifetime experience as an improviser. So
Did you ever play with Nils Peter Molliver?
Actually, yes. And that was part of Left's Hypersomniac thing.
Okay.
So yeah, that came about.
That album, Khmer. Oh, such an amazing, so good.
Fantastic. Yeah. No, he's great. And he's on, I'm really pleased that he played with Twinscapes as well.
Oh, he played with you on Twinscapes then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought I read that and I'm like, then I went trying to find where I read that and I'm like, wait, because I love that album. I think it's called Khmer or K-H.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I mean, and that's what this reminds me of. A touchstone for me as a listener, I'm going to obviously have to draw on what I know. And that album, I'm like, man, this sounds like Khmer. Khmer's a little bit more, this is a little more film noirish kind of. Khmer has a little bit more of an evil sound to it, almost like a darkness to it, which is killer. But this is, this is evocative of a film score, and I love this album. I mean, is there CDs of this, or is it only download stuff?
Yeah, Another World. No, it's available on CD.
Okay, I got to get this one for sure.
Yeah.
And did I read you were doing a follow-up or another?
That's right. That's right. In fact, yesterday, hopefully I finished the mixes. So we're going to have that out at some point this year. I don't know when. We'll have to time it right. But it's a bit different this time because it's just the two of us. We decided not to have any guests.
Okay.
But it feels a bit more in the moment. The last one, it's quite intricate, and we had Isaac do some really fantastic electronics. But I thought this time round, let's keep it a bit sparser.
So no Ian.
Really happy with it. It's
Ian on this one then.
No, not on this one. No. Okay. The one Ian's great, but it sometimes takes him 8 months to send me a trumpet part. So.
Okay. Gotcha.
No, but I also thought maybe this time around, you have to kind of keep things different. I think, it would be it wouldn't be right to have the same people as guests.
I got you. Right, you're always trying to expand your boundaries to try to do new things, which is really cool. How about the Infinite Regress with Robert Peck? Who is this guy? Because man, that guy's voice is amazing. What is it with you that you kind of went from a? I better not say it. Anyways, I'll refrain. I won't say anything mean. You're working with some crazy good vocalists here.
Well, Rob is actually the guy from Random Noise Generator.
Oh, okay.
So that's the connection. Yeah. So he's I just asked him what he thought of the tracks. I was going to just release them as instrumental pieces, and he sent me back an email, and he said, "Oh, if you want, I can do some vocals. I've got some ideas already just from listening to it." So I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. If I don't like it,
right.
I don't
use it. Yeah, right.
And I just thought, wow, this is great. He's really kind of he just fit in. I don't know what he did, but he just obviously felt that the music was right for him.
Crazily, you're gonna probably cringe when I say this, but I kept hearing sort of a George Michael vibe to his voice. And that's not a bad thing because I think George Michael had an amazing voice, but it was just he probably would be like, "Oh Jesus, did you just say that?" But
yeah, he probably would be really shocked to hear that.
Mortified.
I'm going to tell him.
You're going to tell him? He's got a beautiful voice, man. It's just beautiful. It really is.
Yeah, no, he's great. He's never really popped up from from what he does. He's always doing music, but he often doesn't release it.
Okay.
So,
sounds like me.
Yeah, he's always and I've known him for a long time, so we're really comfortable together. But we actually did a whole second Random Noise Generator album, which has never seen the light of day. And if you heard that, it would make sense because it's the missing link, really.
Okay.
But I don't know if that'll ever come out. Yeah, no, he really fit in really well with all that material. So I was very happy that he contributed all the stuff there. It was fantastic.
Serge, you had a couple questions on some of the projects that you listened to that I didn't get a chance to. We tried to kind of divide it. I think Serge spent more time on the music. I spent more time on getting the questions together. So,
I mean, there's a lot to cover, right? And I'm gonna screw up pronouncing the band you mentioned before, O.R.k. Is that?
Yeah, O.R.k. Yeah.
O.R.k. Yeah. So I know there's some kind of some common threads between Metallic Taste of Blood, O.R.k. and then O.R.k. But I thought that was I thought that was one of the darker things you've been involved with. But it was, I don't know, I wasn't expecting it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. But I wasn't sure. Is that something you think you'll continue in the future? Or?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that was that they did the first record really as a very experimental improvised record, and I wasn't involved in that. And then I think they had a few iterations of different bass players. So I know at one point Trevor Dunn did a tour with them. And they had a guy from Holland whose name I can't remember, and Massimo Pupillo from Zoo, who was on the first record, and then eventually they settled on having me. But they wanted to do more sort of song-based material rather than the first record, with the second one anyway. So I got involved when it was quite late in the day. They had a lot of the stuff already down, and I just really played bass on it and suggested a few things. And it still had that sort of experimental thing, because Lef at that point was still singing, although there was sort of structure, much more structure. It wasn't verse, chorus, because he's singing in this language that's all his own. And it was only really the third record where he said to me, I really want to sing in English, you know. And that's where I got more into writing lyrics again. Because basically, again, because like with the backing vocals, he encouraged me to do that because I'm a native English speaker, and he was writing English lyrics. Cool. And he said, well, you know, can you give me some lyrics in English, or can we work on these together, you know? But it was, although it's quite dark music, I mean, we did a few tours in Europe, just small clubs mainly, some of which were a bit sparsely attended, but we did some really good gigs as well. And the one thing that I remember from those gigs was people would go completely crazy, you know, for certain tunes. It was like a shamanic experience, you know. Sometimes people would lose. There's a couple of tunes we used to do. One from the first record called Dog Star Ritual. It's got this massively heavy riff, and then it's just complete ambience, and it swaps between the two. There seemed to be something about that song that people would go crazy.
I think it was probably the hash. I'm just guessing.
Possibly, yeah. But it was.
I can imagine it being a very cool live experience for sure.
It was great fun, you know. But it just, unfortunately, when we did the third album, we had a few problems, and that was around the time when I had a bit of midlife stuff I had to deal with, you know, my mother dying and stuff like this. So I didn't have the energy to devote to it, and I had to take 6 months out of my life to get stuff together. And then it just so happened that we lost our agent at that point. He moved on, and then the record didn't really get any press with the third one. So it had some great press with the second one and with the first one, but we just couldn't build on it. And it was the wrong time. We maybe should have held it off for 6 months or whatever. And then I think after that, when I got back together with Lef again, we were busy with O.R.k, so it kind of got pushed back. And I did discuss it with Geraldo. I said, there's an aspect of O.R.k that I kind of miss with what I'm doing now, and that's this sort of relentless heaviness at times. Right. You know, I'd like to do that again. But Lef, I don't think he's going to want to be involved this time. So we might do something, but it probably won't be O.R.k again.
Okay.
What else you got there, Serge? Did you want to touch on?
I mean, the other big thing, obviously, is I think, you know, unfortunately, yeah. I mean, first of all, musically speaking, your collaboration with Astarte is really cool, and I think it's something most people wouldn't come across. I mean, you have, you know, traditional Ukrainian vocals, you have your very much organic bass, and you have electronics. So all those things together. It sounds weird when you see it on paper, but it works musically. And I know, your collaboration with them, was a few years ago. And how did that start initially? How did you end up collaborating?
It came about because Jeff Lee and I played in Ukraine with Ex-Wise Heads. And after the gig, this guy who I didn't know came up and introduced himself and said he wanted to collaborate with me doing Ukrainian folk music. And I didn't know him. It turned out he was quite well known in Ukraine, but I didn't know the guy. And he'd been he was producing Astarte, the two ladies, you know. So he sent me some vocal tracks, just of them singing, nothing else, no instruments. Right. But I can remember listening to it for the first time and thinking, wow, this is incredible. You know, like these harmonies are amazing, and the structure of the songs is really unfamiliar to me. So it's like another world, you know. So I sort of thought, as partially a sort of creativity exercise, I'd try and write some music around the vocals, you know, and build up from there. So luckily they'd recorded it, you know, to a strict tempo and everything, so I could build up electronic beats around it. And listen to the vocals really carefully, and sometimes for quite a long time, and just try and find a bass note or a phrase that would fit underneath it, and then I'd build everything up from there. So that was how it all started. And I think that I remember sending them the first couple of tracks I did back and thinking they probably won't like it, because I don't know it. I don't even know what they're singing about.
Right.
But I think for them, the fact that I didn't understand the music was almost a plus, because I came at it from somewhere completely different. So they enjoyed it, and for me it's like amazing, really, because it's from another world, and I consider it artistically quite a successful thing. To take the songs, they're a lot of them folk songs, so they're ancient, they're generations old songs, and Ina's actually got a really, really deep knowledge of folk culture. She's studied ethnomusicology.
Oh wow!
So she's collected a lot of these songs from rural parts of Ukraine, and it's interesting because they're about very meaningful things to the people in that part of the world, So there's a song about the harvest, which doesn't sound like a big deal to us because we get our food from the supermarket.
Exactly, yeah.
If you're living in a village and the harvest fails, you die, right?
Right,
so
exactly.
The song, it's a traditional song to bring forth the harvest, to sort of feed the people of the village. It's actually kind of like a music with a function. It's not rock music. It's not entertainment.
Right.
It's sort of part of their part of the fabric of their lives, woven into song.
It's like Native Americans when they would do like the sun dance or the rain dance or those kind of things. They had functional
exactly that.
Yeah. Where did you play? Where did you play in Ukraine? Just Kyiv, or did you get a couple places?
Yeah, I mean, I got to the point where I was really interested in the music, and I just thought, if I'm going to go any further with this, I've just got to go there and meet them again and try and do it. I can't explain it over the internet, partially because they didn't speak English.
Yeah, right.
I can't. It wasn't going to work unless I went there and took the risk of doing it and trying it, So we had a rehearsal, and it just clicked. I think quite early on I could see it was going to work, and they had a local drummer and another bass player, and Edward, the guy who I'd met initially, who sent me the files, played a bit of keyboards, and then eventually John Durant got involved. And we ended up doing quite a reasonable festival gig in Ukraine, which was great fun. And then they bizarrely came to London as part of the cultural exchange with London, and we ended up playing in London, which was great. And we were all looking forward to doing a bit more, and then Putin invaded Crimea.
Yeah. So
that put the stop on that, And then
are they okay as far as you know? They're
well, I mean, I'm in touch with. This is years ago, but this is prior to the recent.
Sure.
Yeah.
War. So,
it was 2014.
Yeah, the one before, right.
Yeah. So I mean, the country went into chaos, for a few years, and I didn't really hear from anybody, and it was difficult to sort of know. I wasn't going to say let's do a gig, It's they got bigger problems,
Yeah.
But eventually, I reconnected with Ina, and that's when we did the EDK record, which is. Me, John Durant, and Ina Kovtun. So it's our names, Edwin, Durant, Kovtun.
Oh, gotcha.
And it's the same thing, basically. It's basically folk music again, but filtered through me and John,
How'd you get connected with John Durant? Like, I mean, you've done a lot of stuff with him. How'd that work out?
Oh, well, John came, I think it came through Tony Levin in a funny sort of way, because I think John had Tony Levin play on one of his records. And I think there's a possibility that when I first met John, if my memory's working correctly, he came to one of the gigs where Stickmen opened up or something. So he was there really to see Tony.
Okay.
And then we met, or certainly there was a connection with Tony. Anyway, I initially started working with John just because he was looking for someone to play on his solo album. Which is called Dance of the Shadow Planets.
Does he have a band? Is he in a band, or I'd never heard of the guy's name.
No. He's become I'm really pleased to see he's become a bit more of a collaborator with different people. So he's also done a record with Robert Jurgendahl, and we work together all the time on various things now. So we've done, I think, 4 Burnt Belief records now.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, yesterday I was working on some double bass stuff for some new tracks he sent me. which is probably going to be for his next solo thing, whatever he does. So we're still in touch fairly regularly.
He's a US guy. He's from the US.
Yeah, he's from Boston.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did he know about you before? Like, did he know who you were when you met him at that thing? Like,
oh yeah, yeah. I think he must have. Yeah, he must have known Porcupine Tree. I think probably. Yeah, yeah. But it was a very easy connection with John. You know, when I went over and played with his, played on his solo album, it was it was kind of interesting because I sort of stepped into this thing that was totally different, but it felt very, very natural to work with John. You know, it was very easy, and it's never been difficult. We just kind of have an unspoken connection. You know, we know what we're going to do.
Well, so do you want to talk a little bit real quickly about like what you've got going on as far as the Ukraine Relief, like what you have? Just speak a little bit on that. We did put all the links down below, so sure. Anybody that wants to donate or go in and do, I don't know, are you donating proceeds from your personal stuff? I mean, I think we'll have to do a part 2 on all the personal Colin Edwin stuff because there's a lot there too. I mean, we didn't even touch on like XY's heads. Is that still a going concern or?
Yeah. Well, me and Jeff, we have an unreleased record, and he was hassling me. He was asking me about it. When are we going to put it out? And I think, yeah, we're probably going to have to do that at some point.
But you still are doing.
I'm still in touch with Jeff. Yeah. I haven't seen him for a while, but I'm hoping we'll probably do a little bit more. I've got some ideas that are probably XY's head suitable.
And by the way, just to note this for the record. It's Jeff Lee, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, he spells his name the proper way, of course.
Right, yeah.
And it was funny. I was saying to Serge, I said, I had this question I ran some of the questions by him that I was going to ask you for PT. And I said, yeah, I wanted to ask Colin if you had any specific memories from the PT years that were really big and other than meeting you and I, of course, because that was probably the highlight of.
That's the bit I remember, yeah.
Well, why wouldn't you? Of course. Of course, the funny thing is if we were walking down the street, you and I, and you passed me, you probably would have had no clue it was me.
Not as you look now, Jeff. No.
Yeah, I know. As my dad likes to say, you look like a fucking bum. Why don't you get a haircut?
Glasses. Well, the glasses can really change people.
Well, that's true. I used to wear contacts back then.
Right, okay.
The hair for sure, but it is funny because I'm like, Dad, I spent all my life in HR and safety and in the office where I couldn't grow my hair out. Now I can, and it's my hair. Don't worry about it, man. He's still living in 1954. So, but any other things you wanted to mention, Colin? Oh, Endless Tapes too. Why don't you touch on that real fast?
Okay, so Endless Tapes. Alessandro Pedretti, someone I met some years ago, just kind of randomly, really. He got in touch with me, but I consider it quite a successful artistic meeting because we kind of complement each other quite nicely, I think. He's got a very unusual approach to music. He's always thinking about patterns and cycles and cyclic things and recurring motifs. And he plays drums mainly, but he kind of carries that over into a lot of his electronic work and some of the kind of keyboard guitar stuff that he does as well. And we did what I thought was quite a good album back in 2015, maybe the first album and an EP. And we managed to do some gigs, but when it came to doing another album, it just felt like it was going to be too hard work because we didn't really get enough interest, to be honest, in the stuff. But we've kept in touch and we've done some really interesting stuff. A few years ago, we did some music for a sculpture. It's in northern Italy. You can go and see a sculpture and there's a QR code on the sculpture and you scan the QR code and then you hear this music, which we've done.
Oh, wow.
So it was a sort of government artistic grant business type thing. Yeah. But we're hoping to sort of do a bit more of that because we've got this idea about locations and sounds and ambient sort of things and locational music. So music in a particular space, exactly where you do that. You scan something and then you can hear it.
Is that here in the States? Do we do that, Serge? I've never seen that.
Yes. I mean, it's not easy. It's not common, but yeah, there's some kind of multimedia installations of that sort I've come across. Yeah.
You know, I'm such a cultured motherfucker that, you know, I never see that stuff. But, anything else, Serge? Did you have?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's not a super happy topic, but I want to go back to, you know, the whole Russian war, and unfortunately, I mean, for me, it was good to see that, you know, you created that you know, that fundraiser with a Bandcamp page. Again, when I left, when my parents left and I left, I was 11. It was still USSR, and you know, I guess I'm Russian, but you know, I consider myself American at this point. It's been a long time, but it, you know, it broke my heart when that whole thing happened. Still does on a, you know, daily basis. You know,
well,
I think in any. Sorry.
No, it was a bit like for me. So it's getting dark here now.
I was gonna say, you suddenly went into like evil Colin mode. I'm like, this is badass.
I'm gonna have to hang on.
Go ahead.
I'm probably gonna have to split fairly soon.
No, we're gonna get you out of here.
It's gonna be in total darkness. No, just to say, really, that you know, I sort of felt, you know, that it was the best use of the music at the time was to make people aware of the culture. Because it's at the end of the day, it's Ukrainian music, which Putin denies Ukraine has its own culture. So it's an aspect of the culture that, you know, is unique to the country.
Yeah.
So, you know, making it free and making it available for people was a motivation. So you can hear that it's not Russian; it's different.
Yeah, very much so. I think that's one of the biggest conflicts, right? Is, you know, unfortunately, is like you said, Russia doesn't think Ukraine has a, you know, distinct, unique culture, which is, you know,
exactly
that. Does.
Exactly that. And what they've done, you know, what we've seen in the war is that they're destroying the cultural monuments,
of course,
and art galleries. Crazy things. They're destroying art galleries and Ukrainian cultural institutions. You know, they're looting the museums, so they're denying the culture. It's part of the imperialist playbook, isn't it? You know.
Well, absolutely. I mean, look at who this guy is. I mean, this guy is like all these leaders. How many leaders can we really look at across the board that are benevolent and do the right things for their countries? Very few of them. I mean, we just got through 4 years of this fucking.
Well,
anyway,
I don't really want to get into that, but
no, I know. But I'm fearing that we could see another 4 years. I don't think we're going to.
Well,
I think his star is setting.
I think there's bigger issues, but I don't know. Like, I think in the creative field, like photography for me, whatever, there's so much insanely good creative content coming out of Ukraine that I think everybody who is in that creative field will know somebody there, and therefore will be affected more by this. As I was. So I was wondering, like, in the musician community, and I almost feel like I feel weird about like listening to Russian artists now, because like, well, are they just tolerating it, accepting it? And I'm glad some. So I know you worked. I believe you played on I Am the Morning's album.
A few years ago.
Yeah. So Mariana, I know, you know, she basically escaped to the UK because she was very much, you know, against this war. So I don't know if you've run across other Russian artists, but it's got to be kind of weird with. You know,
well, I was starting to get really interested in music from that part of the world, because it's quite anything idiosyncratic can come out of a weird culture, you know.
For sure.
So I've discovered a few Russian artists. I don't know what their stance is on the war. It does kind of put you off in a way. It's not, you know, they might be very anti-war for all I know, some of these people, but it's difficult because it does taint things.
Yeah.
It's, you know, but culture it makes me realize, you know, culture is important. It's important for me to let that Ukrainian stuff out. You know, it's not mine. It's their music. It's folk music. It's my collaboration. It's not, you know, part of my culture really. But I thought it was important as well to raise the money, you know. So the money's all gone to the British Red Cross as much as possible.
That's awesome. Do you have any idea where you're at with that? Have you done okay with it? You don't have to say a number, but
yeah, it's done well. It's definitely done about probably in your money, in your dollars, a couple of $1,000s, I think. Yeah,
nice. It's
great. Some people have been really generous. So
yeah, the best thing about Ukraine creative content are those guys that climb up those 8,000-foot towers and then hang off the edge.
I mean, watch that.
Is it any better? Like, does it get any better?
It's crazy. I've seen all that. Yeah.
It's like, are you out of your fucking mind? What are you doing? Well, listen, Colin, man. Serge, do you have anything you want to tie?
No, yeah, I don't want to keep. Colin's looks like almost incomplete.
Yeah, I mean, he's almost
in
darkness.
Here anyway.
I'm waiting for like the red horns and red eyes to come up, and we'll find out that it was actually Colin who was the Satan of Porcupine Tree. After all, we knew it.
But listen, Colin, I do want to thank you for doing this with us. It's been good talking to you again.
Yeah, nice to see you guys again after however many years.
Yeah, it's been 11 years. Have you made it over to the States at all since you were last here? And
yeah, I did a couple of times. Yeah.
Okay, for like tours or for family or?
No, to see John actually.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, that's awesome, dude. Well, I tell you, if you're gonna get over here anytime soon, I'll drop my number to you. If you get over this way, we'll come meet you in New York or something like that. If I can,
yeah. But hopefully, my next trip will be with O.R.k. But fingers crossed, huh?
Yes, that would be really, really fantastic. Keep me in tune, and if that does happen, let Serge or I know. And like I said, I'll hit you up privately in email. I'll send you my number and his. And if you're coming over, we'll do whatever we can to help. Keep it in mind we're both old fucks now, so we don't have that energy level to go crazy and posterized towns with flyers and stuff, but I'd love to get out and catch you live. I mean, just it's you have a really storied career in a lot of ways, and it may not be the giant Gene Simmons like stuff, but you're doing what you like doing, and you're making a living out of. I mean, that is such an important thing. So many people have jobs they fucking hate. And they're miserable, and they're on antidepressants and anti-anxietals and all that stuff. And they're drinking crazy, and you're getting to do this cool kind of lifestyle. And the thing that was always cool about you, dude, was you were always kind of like the happy. I don't know if it was really true. Maybe that's not who you are. But every time we'd be around you, you'd always be sort of just upbeat and just fun. You were always just super cool to chat with and hang out with. And I'll never forget when we were in Kentucky. Was it Kentucky? Cincinnati. You were playing Cincinnati, but it was across the river from Cincinnati in this tiny little place called Mad Hatters. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that one.
It was just this almost like a bowling alley like place. And we went out, you, me, and Richard. We went out walking around the air. It was you, me, and Richard, and I think it was just the three of us. We went out, and you guys ended up playing chess. We found some little coffee bar, and you and Rich were just playing chess. You don't remember that?
No, I don't remember that one.
Yeah, that would have been on. Well, I remember Steve talking about the riff and Arriving Somewhere, so it would have been Deadwing Tour. It was probably the first or second leg of that. But yeah, man, there was a lot of those crazy, weird times where it was just, were you at the barbecue out in LA when we did the barbecue out in J Monkey's backyard?
Well, I don't remember that.
Oh man, that was when you had what was this? The guy that had the heart attack, Ross.
Oh yeah, I remember Ross. Yeah.
Remember Ross?
Yeah.
Like Ross came because I think he was scamming on my friend Tracy. He was thinking he was something was gonna happen. Something was gonna happen, man. I remember that. And then he had like a heart attack, right after. Yeah,
I do remember that actually.
So, yeah. Anyway, man, let you go because you're almost in complete darkness.
Yeah, I'm gonna be. It's time for me to get back in my coffin. So
I got you, brother. Oh, in your coffin, yeah. All right, man. Thank you so much, and
all right, cheers, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Colin.
All right, we'll see you, man. Bye.
Cheers.
It was cool. That was awesome seeing him. It's hard to believe it's been 11 fucking years, man. Well,
We're
on
still live, by the way, Jeff.
Huh?
We're still live, by the way.
Yeah, I know. That's
fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyone, Issa, you had asked if this is going to be up, and I did answer it, but I'll answer it again. Yeah, I have a bunch of stuff up there, and I'm gonna warn you, Issa. I'm just gonna tell you straight up. There's a couple of deep dive videos. One on Porcupine Tree from back in October 21, was it? Or yeah, 21, where Serge and I and two other guys go deep into the catalog of Porcupine Tree, and we rip things apart, talk about old stories on the road and stuff like that. And then we just recently did. Serge and I did one on No Man, which is really, really good one, I think. And then we did one on the Steve Wilson solo catalog. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not favorable to a good bit of it towards the end. And I'm not real, personally, I'm not real nice about some things. So, I don't care who sees them. They're out there. Richard knows about them. And, they're my opinions and my feelings about stuff. So, just warning you, if you see that and you're like, oh my God, did he actually say that? Yeah, I probably did. I stand behind what I say and my opinions on things. So nothing personal to Steve, but there's not a huge fan anymore, to be honest with you. That's just how it is. So you can check out this. It'll probably take a half hour, 45 minutes to render fully to go all the way back. Colin does talk a little bit about the Porcupine Tree stuff and very democratically says more or less his perception of things, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about it. And we really appreciate Colin being here. We appreciate everybody that popped in this morning. I've been up since 3 a.m. working on this after going to sleep at 9, so I think I'm going to go take a nap after this.
And I got to go take care of
man. See you, bud.
Yep. Later.
And that is that. We'll see you. Bye.